Cryptid Huntress. I'm Jessica Jones. What's up, y'all? I know that is a totally different intro than you guys are used to. We're playing with some new intros right now, and our good friend Kenny with Midnight Lycanthropy, the North American Dogman Project, he made me that, and I thought it was really cool. So, what's up? Welcome to On the Hunt, everybody, where we are going on the hunt tonight with Trey from Squatch Me Now. He's a filmmaker, a Bigfoot researcher. This is going to be such a fantastic show. I am so glad you guys are here to join us tonight. Go get the popcorn. Gosh, we've got so much to talk about. We were cutting it up before the show a while ago, and we got some more dots to connect tonight, y'all. Some new ones with some Cherokee legends out of North Carolina, the East Coast, and some giants and some Bigfoots to talk about. So let's do this tonight. Man, I just got in from the woods. I took my son out, my dog. We were out there doing a little Bigfooting today. And I was actually in the middle of shooting a little promo for tonight's show. And we had some weird activity that happened during that. And so you guys go check that out. It's on my social media. Check it out. You'll see me throw my phone down and take off running. I cut the running part out. Y'all don't want to have to deal with that and listen to me panting all the way to the truck. Okay. So, but anyways, it's wild. It's a lot of fun. And that's what we're here for. Bigfoot, right? Okay. So if you guys would like to follow along with all of my shows and everything, please go over to my website. That's the cryptidhuntress.com. You can find all of my shows there, all of my archives of shows. My social media links are there, and all the events that I'm going to be at, including next weekend. I'm going to be up in Blue Ridge, Georgia. We have the UFO conference up at Blue Ridge. This actually benefits a great cause. I think the proceeds are going to the food bank for the Fannin County Family Connection up there. So if you guys want to come in, buy a ticket, come hang out with the Cryptid Huntress and Matthew Delph. Dr. John Stamey will be there. The Erie Travels guy, Mark Muncie, will be there, and Les Durant and some other people. It's going to be really fun. And Matthew Delph will probably show his video of the orbs that turn into gray aliens and run around the backyard. I wish he'd bring that on my show, y'all. I'm still waiting. But we will be there on Saturday. It starts at 11 a.m. if you're in the North Georgia area. All right. Also, I do have a Patreon, and I have an Etsy shop if you guys would like to support my work and go shopping in my shop on Etsy. It's called War Woman Goods. And so I want to thank everybody for all your support. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. And also, I am actually the keynote speaker. I don't know how this happened. At the Georgia Bigfoot Conference this year, it's going to be up in North Georgia in Demarest at Piedmont University. I will be their keynote speaker this year at the 2025 Georgia Bigfoot Conference. You guys save the date. Come up and see me. That's going to also be a really good time. There's going to be a huge list of speakers there. Some of my good friends are going to be up there with me speaking, including David Pardue. I just saw him in the chat. What's up, David Pardue? Out of North Carolina. I let David know we're going to be talking about North Carolina Bigfoots today. So that's his stomping ground. And so, yeah. So y'all come see me at that as well. Okay. Well, let's get to our show, y'all, because I'm Trey here. Trey does not do a whole lot of public appearances. He does not do a whole lot of interviews. So I am so honored and grateful and blessed that he's here today. And so let's get into it. He's got some fantastic films coming out. And so y'all are going to hear about that tonight. Trey Howell is a lifelong researcher of all things esoteric. For over 20 years, he's worked in the film and marketing industry, and he currently owns Howell Media, a digital marketing agency focused on content and social media strategy. In 2019, he launched Squatch Me Now, a social media presence where he curates the best evidence for the Bigfoot phenomenon. In the last few years, Squatch Me Now has grown to over 500,000 followers across multiple social platforms, and he's currently producing a film series actually, on the subject of Sasquatch, and it's titled Masters of the Hunt. And I want to quote this. Okay, this is from his newest movie. It hasn't been released yet. He's got a Kickstarter going for it. Since prehistoric times, indigenous people across the globe have encountered Bigfoot-like beings. The reports persist to this day, from ancient giants to the art of the hoax, wood apes to the woo factor. This series will be a comprehensive investigation into the full spectrum of the Sasquatch phenomenon. We'll take a journey through history and around the world to seek the truth behind the origins and ongoing reality known as Bigfoot. Our adventure begins in the mountains of Appalachia in what is now the southeastern U.S. Here, the ancient Cherokee were visited by giants from the West. They were known as the Lord of the Game or the Masters of the Hunt. Please help me welcome to the show, Mr. Trey of Squatch Me Now. What's up, Trey?
How you doing?
Welcome to the Cryptid Huntress channel. Thank you for being here.
Think I'm being back. Been here a couple times.
Yeah. Yes, you have. Well, actually, you were on. I think you came on Spaced Out Radio. So yeah, you have definitely sat down with me a couple times. We've had a good couple of interviews, and it was really fun. And it's been too long. It's been too long. It's been a year since I've seen you.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you been up to?
Well, there's a lot going on in the world, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
So life, but other than that,
Right.
just continuing research and working on this film project, which is or a docu-series. So it's like hour-long episodes, um, starting in the Southeast, and just looking at this phenomenon from a lot of different levels. I think something we really need to do that we're not doing is thinking bigger about the Bigfoot subject. Everyone's trying to compartmentalize this into their expertise, whatever they think it is, and it's everything, isn't it? I mean, that's what everything's telling us right now. We're in this very special time in the world where things are coming to light and the veil is thinning, and we're learning about a lot of things that have been hidden from us, and I think it's a great time to really push forward a little bit further with this subject, and instead of trying to pigeonhole it into one thing or another, really look at the full scope of how this connects to our origins as human beings, and how Bigfoot is really sort of a multi-directional stepping stone into all these other sort of esoteric subject matters. So that's sort of where I'm going. I started a Bigfoot page because I thought it was the most sort of grounded in reality type, paranormal phenomenon. And it connects to so many things. It's so easy to research in a lot of ways. We're constantly finding new hominid specimens. We're not necessarily finding huge ones, but the Denisovans are great. I don't know if you know about the Denisovans, but they're a recently found hominid species that's some mix of humans, Neanderthals, and some other unknown DNA donor. And
Donor.
they had molars the size of cave bear teeth. So you're talking about molars like this big. So if the molar's this big, you got to have a big head, you got to have a big jaw, all these things. So did they just have a giant Funko Pop head, or was the body proportional to the size of the head that would be proportional to the size of the jaw that would carry a tooth of that size? All we have are skulls, parts of skulls, pieces, fragments. So we're finding all these new parts of the human family every day, and it's becoming more interesting. So I thought this was a very like grounded place to start. And what I find funny is that we still get there's no evidence for this all the time. You know, that's what a great thing about the socials. It's been a great way to sort of research humans and human behavior and how we respond to things and what the questions people have are really about the subject that need to be answered. But I find it really funny that we have the government like declassifying, you know, UFOs, whatever that is. But Bigfoot is still like, that's crazy. You know, that's a silly, it's a silly, no, this is like way simpler for me to wrap my head around than whatever the source of the UFO phenomenon is. But I think it's all connected. So this series is really my Bigfoot theory of everything. You know, that's where we're going. But you got to start in pieces. And so we're biting it off in hour segments that are focused on different areas of the country and the world, and then tying what we find there to other places. So like we were talking before the show about Sulcaloo, which is also Judiculla. Judiculla is the anglicized version of Sulcaloo. Sulcaloo was a giant that the Cherokee encountered about 400 or 500 years before the white man showed up. And he married a Cherokee maiden, and she went off and lived with him in the mountain with his tribe of giants, the giants from the west. So a few hundred years later, you have white people in those same mountains about 19 miles away. Mostly at this point Irish and Scottish, but they have replaced what were the original settlers, which were French. And they had a Bigfoot-like creature known as Boojum. And Boojum liked two things. He liked precious gemstones, and he liked beautiful women. And he would go and he would peek on the girls that would go down to the fishing hole or the swimming hole to bathe, and he was known for peeking on them. Well, one of these girls supposedly fell in love with the Boojum. Her name was Annie. And the Boojum had this habit of going away, being gone for a while, and then he would come back. And this is very similar to the Sulcaloo legend. You know, eventually, you know, Annie would go out into the woods and hoot. They said she would hoot for him. She would hoot for Boojum to come back, which I find is interesting because it's very similar to like say a whoop, right? So she would go out in the woods and she would hoot for Boojum, and that's where you get the term hootenanny. You know, like you've heard of like the Appalachian party, where you know a wild party is a hootenanny, right?
Yes,
well, that's where the term hootenanny comes from.
I've been to some hootenannies.
Right. So eventually Boojum came back and Annie went off with him, and she never returned. But in both cases, we're talking about a big, hairy, gruesome-looking giant. So the question is, why would these women run off with him? And you know, how does that connect to a lot of sort of interesting Cherokee mythology about these figures? So what's interesting about the name Boojum is that it sounds almost Creole. And the original settlers there were French. And in France, you have this creature called the Bazajan in the Pyrenees Mountains, which is a Bigfoot-like creature that has very similar characteristics to Boojum and Sulcaloo. So, you know, it's not that that it is the same creature, but the French settlers there probably originally identified that as something they knew called the Bazajan, and then you have the Scottish and the Irish sort of turning that into Boojum, like they turned Sulcaloo into Judiculla.
Well, okay, Trey. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Kent Baxter. That is so sweet of you. That you gave me the super sticker right here. Thank you so much for your support, Kent. That means the world to me. He says you're doing a superb job. Keep on grinding. Thank you. I just grind out. I grinded out all these shows all week. Thank you so much, Kent. You're the best. And And so I wanted to let you know, I know Trey, you and I have talked about this before. I've actually been up to Judaculla Rock
Right.
before, and I was up there with my Cherokee friend of mine, and we did some camping up there. We had a jam-packed weekend of Bigfoot activity and a potential skinwalker. Actually, we had a lot of stuff that happened. The skyships over Cashers were floating above our heads all weekend. It
Wow.
was wild. Um, but Chief David, who I was with, David Webb, he's written a book about Judaculla Rock, and he took us there. We went there. I think we just went once, from what I can remember. Let's see. He took us once. Now this is Judaculla Rock from probably the 1920s or so, but this is a ancient rock full of petroglyphs on it. This also is an area of very high strangeness. Okay, the whole area is deep within the Appalachian Mountains, and most people don't really know exactly what these petroglyphs mean. I do believe that Chief David was telling us that it's like a creation story. According to him,
I've
Star
heard
Wars
star
even.
maps, all kinds of things, but you'll see the
Mhm.
six-toed footprint at the bottom,
Yeah.
which was, or handprint, which was indicative to those particular giants that the Cherokee encountered. Supposedly had
The six-fingered
Bigfoot.
giants. Now,
Right.
do you think that Sukalu was a Sasquatch type being, or could it have been a human giant?
Well, what's a human giant, Jess?
Hmm.
Right? I mean, is it
Yeah.
these are the questions we're now looking at. Like, what
Right.
is a human giant? Do we have evidence for it? A lot of people, they're just going to say, oh, it's a Nephilim, or it's a,
Yeah.
when we're talking about the Bigfoot subject, for me, it's a Bigfoot. That's where the Bigfoot name came from. There's a Bigfoot print. Press dubbed it Bigfoot, right? So for me,
Right.
the Bigfoot phenomenon, when I say let's think bigger about Bigfoot, it encompasses all these different potential types, whether it's extraterrestrial, ultra terrestrial, terrestrial, if it's a hominin, if it's, whatever we're talking about here, it's all of those things. And I think it can be all of those things at the same time.
Hmm.
So, and then why are we seeing them? Are we seeing them because it came out of this inner earth cave? Are we seeing it because it lives in the woods? Are we seeing it because there's some sort of disruption in electromagnetic field in that particular place you're at that particular time, and you're seeing through time to a earlier time because time doesn't exist according to quantum physics? It's like,
Yeah.
this phenomenon's huge. I mean, it could, and the instance of a sighting could have multiple origins, multiple sources of why you're seeing it at that time.
It
Um,
could. And I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to point out that of several stories that I'm familiar with, even out of Georgia, okay, have traditionally been interpreted as people being attacked or having encounters with Bigfoot, a wild man, a Sasquatch. But if you go back and you really dig into these stories, like the Okefenokee attack of the giant, it's like a giant attack of the Okefenokee swamp of
right, the swamp.
1829. A lot of people just assume that's a Bigfoot. It's like a clan of Bigfoots, but I believe it was a race of humans, like human giants.
Right.
And a lady named Barb that I've met, she's so sweet. She calls herself the Swamp Hag or something. She's so funny. But she grew up there at the Okefenokee, and she said that it is well known amongst the locals that it's actually were giant humans. It wasn't a Sasquatch at all.
Well, something we're looking at, because we're starting in the Southeast, we're starting in the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, etc. Florida is going to be it needs to be its own thing, I think, maybe to a certain extent. Um, but something we've looked at is the connection to Mexico. Do you know the connection to the Aztecs of giants in the Southeast? It's that,
No. I know the mounds and the
so about
pyramids.
400 or 500 years before the Sulcaloo story of the giants from the West was recorded by the Cherokee, the Aztecs supposedly ran the Kinametsin out of Mexico and into the American Southeast. So you have these giants that are being pushed out of, that supposedly helped build like the pyramid at Cholula and Teotihuacan and all these places, are then pushed out to, a lot of them were killed, and the few that survived were pushed into the southeastern United States. So suddenly you have the Spanish explorers then coming, 400 or 500 years later, and every Spanish explorer's log has encounters with giants, and a lot of them were said to they just look like giant Native Americans. So, I mean, where did they, but again, the Mexican legend was that those giants came out of inner Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, all those tribes supposedly came out of inner Earth, but the giants were included in that. So, what are the giants? And I mean, what is Bigfoot to you? Is Bigfoot, does it have to be more hairy? Is it less hairy? Is it more ape? Is it less ape? I mean, that's the question. I think we need to really not only think bigger, but also get more specific.
Well, we've got this. Okay, so this is the go-to, right? This is like the chart that
Sure, yeah.
Bigfoot field researchers are like, well, there's 4 kinds, right? Well,
Right.
I think that there's probably way more different species and categories, and
Well, you're going to have
this is a
hybridization.
wonderful
You're going to
question.
have, some sort of
Mhm.
adaptations. That's
Yes.
why when I look at love Jeff Meldrum, great stuff. But when you're trying to base whether something's a Bigfoot or not based on foot morphology alone, I think that can only be included to certain environments, because when you get down into, say, Florida, why would the track of a creature that's adapted to Florida look the same as a track that's a creature that's adapted to Saskatchewan or something like that? It's not going to be the same biometrics. It shouldn't be.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different types, and they probably hybridized in a lot of different ways. We're now looking at what 2 million years. So it's since a lot of hominids are really starting to split off, since we've been around and there were hominids here before us and all this stuff. So that third one you showed was the more like, I think it was type 3 on that list.
Yeah.
That's actually a reconstruction from a guy that wrote the book Them and Us, which was his reinterpretation of what Neanderthal looked like. He had a forensic artist do their own adaptation, because every time we see this in standard scientific literature, it's just like some skinny guy with a pot belly and a spear with a weirder face than we have, and that's a Neanderthal. And like, I don't that's if you look at the skull comparison to like a human and a Neanderthal skull, it's a very different morphology. So they probably looked a lot different, and we don't know what they looked like fleshed out. Any of these fossils we have, it's very minimal when it comes to anything hominid or hominin. And we
That's an
really have
interesting
not,
point.
not only can we not really reconstruct them properly from a jawbone and some teeth, which is what we have for most of them, but you can't. What does that look like fleshed out? That's based on the interpretation of the artist. That's purely speculative in every instance that you see these things. But we take them, we open our history books and we're in school, and oh, that's what a Neanderthal looked like, right?
Yeah.
But it probably wasn't. So
Well, wouldn't that be cool if we had Sasquatch and Bigfoot in our school books in the future? I mean, do you ever foresee that happening?
I mean, wouldn't it be cool to have like a homeschool curriculum,
Yeah. Yeah.
based around something that we're talking about doing? So Biggin, if you go to the Biggin official on Instagram, you think there's a link in my Squatch Me Now bio. This is my friend Brock, who's an actor and an ex-pro wrestler, and we're using him in the documentary for our B-roll camera test. Not only history, but something we're looking at is, why is Bigfoot blurry? I think that's the number one question I get on my social platforms is, with all the great camera phones we have today, why can't we get a good picture of Bigfoot? So that's what we addressed. This was shot with a 600 millimeter lens from probably 50 yards. And you're talking a 600 millimeter lens, it's about as big as you're going to get. And that's the shot you want, right? But it's not the shot you're going to get with a 24 millimeter lens that's on your cell phone. And as soon as you start zooming in on that cell phone, that digital zoom is going to really screw you up. This is basically the kind of lens a Nat Geo photographer is going to have in the field. And if we
Not
want to
many
get
of us are going to have that in the field.
no, I mean the rig I was on is a very expensive rig. So
Yeah.
if we want the clear footage, if you want that clean shot, because people watch these documentaries and they see these ridiculous promos that like Apple creates for their phones. And I have one, I'm not hating on Apple, but they put a lot of extra equipment into producing a lot of these uh, stuff that they put out as like test footage of their phones. It's just not the right. It's not the right tool for the job. There are some now. Something I'm going to propose to people is if you really need to figure out a cheap way to use your phone for this kind of stuff, the best thing you can probably do is get a spotting scope, like $80 on Amazon, and it usually has a little cradle for your phone that holds up. It's still, not going to be 600 millimeters, but it's going to be better, and you'll have a little stabilization. But it's very hard, even if you have your phone, to pull your phone out in this situation and get a
Yeah.
clean shot.
Oh yeah,
Especially if it's
everybody's
moving
fumbling around.
fast. In most of these cases, it's moving fast at like 100 yards away, and they just know, like, hey, that's not a cow. It's not a bear. It's not, these are the sightings people get. You don't get like, I had Brock like walk out, stop. All right there. For that image that you just saw, it took a lot. Even if I was out in the field with that camera set up, if one just runs across the trail, right, it's going to be very hard to get that shot very quickly, So, but this is our first this is like the Mark 1 suit. We're going to be doing various Bigfoot types for different, we're not, you mentioned the art of the hoax in the synopsis. That's something we're looking at, and it's something that, when I was on the confessionals a while back with Tony, and I don't remember if it was on the show or in between. He was talking about how this was like a very controversial subject as far as looking at the hoax aspect of this. But I think we need to look at how hard or easy it is to actually hoax these videos. And so that's part of what we're doing. I'm looking at some of the best videos that I've posted, and can we recreate this? What would it take to make this, video? And if it's doable, then it's doable. And you have to say, at least it could have been hoaxed. But there's some videos like the Russian Leaping Yeti video. Sometimes it's called the Leaping Almasty. Really, it's just this giant. It looks like a giant chimp just jumping over fallen trees and stuff for like a good probably 100 yards, just running like crazy. It's quadrupedal at some points. That's probably one of the best videos. I've been trying to figure out how to recreate that practically, like with a person in a suit, um, for years now, and it's like it's impossible. We've had injuries.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I bet it's pretty dangerous to do stuff like that. Martin, thank you so much for that super sticker. I appreciate you and us so much. Thank you. Um, I would assume that it's very dangerous, and you can't. Okay, I've worn costumes before. Okay, I used to do theater and stuff and performing arts, or even just on Halloween. Okay, wearing a mask on Halloween, it's
Right.
hard to see in a mask or any kind of suit, right? And I couldn't imagine. I mean, even those people that are like mascots at football games, I don't understand how they can dance around in those things.
Right.
Uh,
I mean, and we're also like hiking up hills in that suit. He's already 6'7", over 300 pounds. And then he's got basically a fur coat on, and
right.
that giant headpiece and these giant feet that I've created that go over a pair of boots. So he's about 7.5 feet right there, but he's got
Wow.
to hike up a side of a mountain in that for us to get shots we need, and that's rough, just that alone. But being able to not trip and like, break your neck, come falling back down the mountain just because you can't, the feet are ridiculous, like wearing clown shoes. Um, and then it's hard to see. He's got all that hair in his face. He does have an appliance on, so at least it's like, flush to his face, but it does affect peripheral vision as well. Um, so you know, it's not an easy thing to do, and being athletic is like almost impossible. So when you see these videos where these things are moving like really fast through even like minimal brush or even a uneven ground. It's that's very, very hard to do in a suit. It's almost impossible. So
Mhm.
we're looking at that, how hard or easy is it to fake things, and trying to like bring people the different sort of Bigfoot types to life through practical effects, which you saw there. Things get more complicated. That's a basic fursuit. Like I said, it's kind of a Mark One. But if we wanted to a lot of Bigfoot encounters, they talk about the musculature but with like light hair over it.
Mhm.
They can see through the hair. It's just like a light coat of hair. That's a super hard thing to do. It's like it's not something easy to do in digital. Even with AI, try to do anything in AI with hair, it's going to look a little wonky. It doesn't move, right? Typically, right? And then
Mhm.
so what you would have to do is actually create like a muscle suit and punch individual hairs in. Paint the suit, then punch the hairs in. It'd take a long time. It's a lot of work, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, um, a lot of talent.
A lot of
So
talent. And yeah, that just seems like a lot of work to pull off a hoax. I mean, there's so many Bigfoot videos out there today. People, some people just assume that they're all fake, but they're not. I believe that a lot of the videos out there are real. You've got a great archive of some of the best Bigfoot videos on your Instagram, on your social media, your TikTok. Squatch me now, y'all. Go to Squatch me now, please,
yeah, you
and
can
go
just
check those
Google it.
out.
You'll probably
Yeah.
find the links that way.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, you got some great ones though, and it's a great archive. And I also wanted to thank you. I know I've sent you a couple of videos over the past year or so of like things I've been like, hey Trey, do you think this is real or is this AI? You're like one
Yeah,
of my
it's
resident
getting harder to
experts.
tell, but I think it'll
Mhm.
always I've seen some really good AI, but it's still missing
Yeah,
some
there's
soul. There's no soul. That's really, I mean, it's that, and that's where funny enough, that's where we're sort of ending the first 6 episodes. So each run will be 6 episodes, about 6 hours, and each sixth episode will it'll be sort of a tie it all together type thing. So in the first season, the sixth episode is the Uncanny Valley. Um, so one of my theories around the Bigfoot subject, and we can just call that hominins or whatever, um, is that most of ancient folklore is saying that at least some of these things were preying on us, preying on humans,
yeah.
um, both cannibalizing, if you want to call it that, interbreeding, stealing, kidnapping, whatever. That's pretty prevalent in the folklore. A lot of people don't want to touch the sort of that side of things, but you don't want to live there. There are other aspects to it, but certainly prevalent. So if you look at where civilization cropped up, it was right along the Zagros Mountains, they're in Iran. They run on the border of like Iran and Turkey. And so right on the other side of that, you have Samaria, Mesopotamia, and everything starts cropping up. Like we had to stop here and fortify. We were coming out of Africa. We ran into the Zagros Mountains. Well, what the Zagros Mountains were where we think humans and Neanderthals and other early hominins probably all first encountered each other on their way out of Africa. So to me, it's just interesting that we kind of got backed up there and started building walls around ourselves. And those walls led to agriculture and all the technology we come to today. And then we had the 1970s where this Japanese scientist was doing experiments in robotics and how people responded to different types of robots. And he found that the more human the robot looked, the more uneasy we got about how we felt about that robot. Um, and what that's called is there was a chart which kind of showed the test subject's response, and it had this huge dip as it got to a certain level of human, but wasn't quite human. Once it got to looking fully human, we were okay with it. And when it looked like a toaster or like R2D2, we were okay with it. But when it looked almost human, but it wasn't human, we had a real problem with it psychologically. And that's called the uncanny valley, was this dip in that graph. And so for me, it's like, is that this ancestral sort of trauma response to things that we encountered leaving Africa that looked human but weren't quite human, that were preying on us. And if those things were what we met in the Zagros Mountains and made us back up and create civilization, has it now led us back to create AI, which will become the new thing that will prey on us?
Oh God, that sounds so ominous, Trey. But you're
So
right.
that's was the
You're right.
uncanny valley in the Zagros Mountains.
Oh
There's
my
a big
gosh. I mean, it is really odd when you're around something that's not supposed to exist. First of all, there's something just really off about it. And your body, with everything inside my body, my gut, it's almost like you want to run. It's like, God, but most people would want to run. I've never run. I've never ran. Okay.
right.
But I'm just saying it's there's just something off when you're seeing something you're not supposed to see. And yes, it looks like a human, but it's not a human. And you know
I
it's
mean,
not a
it's
human.
gonna trigger something in you that is
Hmm.
ancient and real. I mean, I really believe that.
Hmm.
And again, not all of the folklore is, Sukulu and Boojum never really did anything bad to the Cherokee or to the settlers or anything like that. There's no stories of them, cannibalizing them. There are stories, the Iroquois have stories, of those the stone giants that did cannibalize and kill them. And they would put out, sacrifices to them and all this stuff, very like, to keep them satiated. But in those stories, there's not. But what's interesting, we touching on the wood apes to woo factor. A lot of stuff that's been becoming more viral on the internet lately is the declassification of the telepathy files from the CIA. They did it in 2019, but it's really only picking up because it was right at the end and there was kind of that big COVID smokescreen. So people weren't talking about it. But all these and telepathy files came out where successful human telepathy experiments by the Russians and the Americans in the 70s. So if humans are capable of telepathy, were other early hominids capable of telepathy? And if so, is that where we get the woo aspect of this phenomenon known as mind speak? I mean, it's pretty common. I've had people, even witnesses, that told me, like, I don't want you to talk about this, but I heard get out of here in my head, but it wasn't in my voice. And then I saw a tree fall, and then this thing walked off into the woods, So, but that's always the thing they don't want you to mention because they don't want to, like, you know,
Trey, I got to tell you, the first Bigfoot team I was ever on, my OG team, Enigma Research Group. When I first got on that team, I knew that those guys took a whole different approach to Bigfooting because they had established that Bigfoots are real. They had been going to the same area in North Georgia for decades and studying the ones that were there and trying to communicate with them. And two of them actually were very, very well trained and versed in remote viewing. And we're talking about like military style remote viewing, right?
yeah,
And so once they invited me to come out there with their team, and we at some point over the years we've had this big team come together, and we were all taught remote viewing, and it was because part of the reason was communication with the telepathy with the Bigfoots,
yeah,
was communication with them, and even communicating before we go. Like you can have communication. I could have it right now in my house with something that's in the mountains.
yeah,
Okay, like, hey, I'm coming to see you guys when the moon is full and the leaves are
right,
orange. you know,
yeah, yeah.
let them know.
I
Yeah,
believe
that's
it.
what my
And so
team does.
what's interesting about Sukulu is that he was said to be able to control the animals. He's the lord of the game. And
Mhm.
but if you really read the legend, he could, and various versions of the legend, because there are a few different versions out there, he could actually, like, the animals just kind of like wandered around him or just stayed outside. He would come out, pluck one, and clean it, and that was dinner or whatever. But he could actually control the minds of the game that he wanted. So that being very mind speak telepathy type thing. And even in the legend, it says after he's met the maiden and her mother and he leaves one time, the mother's complaining that he didn't bring the right stuff or whatever,
Right.
typical. And he,
Typical.
I'm joking. He
That's funny.
says, it says now wherever he was, he knew their thoughts, right? So it's saying like and what he did was like he brought a tree, but he didn't break it up into firewood. He just brought the whole tree and dropped it, and the mom was mad that he didn't like break it up into firewood.
Typical
So
mother.
it says now wherever he was, he knew their thoughts. So he comes back the next night, takes the whole tree away, and doesn't put anything else back. Early family squabbles. Um, but so that was a story. So what's interesting is like we have telepathy being talked about in this like now like 900-year-old Cherokee legend. Um, and it's talking about, not only him being able to hear, control the animals with his mind, but he can hear the humans' thoughts. So my question is, and relating to the Boojum as well, are they picking mates and controlling these women's mind with telepathy? And that's why the women weren't, because the mother of the Cherokee maiden was never allowed to see him because it would scare her away. But the girl was okay with it. The girl was okay with his grotesque features and his, whatever. So why were they? And then why was this Annie girl obsessed with this Bigfoot or whatever giant, whatever it was? We don't know.
He probably kept her warm at night. I'm just saying.
Maybe, I mean,
Maybe fluffy and warm. I
the
don't know.
girls love
Girls
rubbing
love a
on
big
big
fluffy
penny
man.
drop.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So, but it's
Oh my
interesting,
gosh.
it's interesting to think like were they,
It
we
is.
have
Well,
lots of Indian legends of interbreeding with different types of Bigfoot based on where they were.
yeah. Well, MK David. Okay, so I can't put in this picture up because this has always made me giggle every time I see it. It is so funny to me. Like, how could a woman actually really want, to have a Bigfoot boyfriend? I don't know, because most of the stories we do hear are like women being kidnapped and forcibly procreating with Bigfoots if they do that, right? And so I saw a really interesting presentation. I had the privilege of going in here and MK Davis speak at the East Alabama Bigfoot Town Hall last year, and so he spoke live and gave a presentation, and it was amazing. But he was talking about how it's, of course, he went down the different categories of Bigfoot as we know them. Okay, and he was very straightforward with like, well, these different types, like the patty type, I believe he said the patty type is from the result of humans and this other and I know that that's like what the Melba Ketchum studies and all that say. It's like the mother side is human, the father side is something other. They just don't know what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I think Bubba Ketchum will probably be validated one day,
Mhm.
even if it, maybe not, but regardless, I think she's on the right track. I think we have the DNA evidence that Neanderthals and humans interbred. This wasn't that, I don't think. This wasn't the caveman rolling up, the Geico caveman rolling up to the cave and picking up the girl with flowers or something. Like, obviously, that's not how these things
Right.
occurred. But it is interesting to me. We're finding now that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other newly discovered hominids have much larger brains than we do. Their skulls were much bigger and they were filled with brain. And it was potentially developed in different ways than ours are. Well, if you're a apex predator, and telepathy would be a great thing to develop, for your brain
Mhm.
if you're adapting and evolving in that way. And we're talking about things that if you're looking at Bergman's law, where like larger animals are adapting, becoming larger in more colder climates. You had hominids coming. We're finding hominids in Europe now that were probably pre-Africa. But if you're talking about in Europe, but if we're talking about ones that came from Africa or other areas, Southern Europe, they're moving into Northern Europe and Asia and adapting to those climates, in the Ice Age and before. You're dealing with things that are going to adapt in amazing ways, physically and mentally, to be predators. And
Mhm.
They're eating a lot of protein, and that brain's getting big and powerful. So was it used to create, technology? No, but perhaps they're more on a more natural evolutionary path than we are. Maybe we'd have already developed telepathy if we hadn't crutched on civilization.
That's
So
100% right, actually. And so so we're all telepathic, everybody. We're born telepathic. We all have the ability to use telepathy and to communicate. And I like to use the example of like, well, have you ever thought of somebody and then your phone rang and then it was them,
right,
right? That kind of stuff. Well, we have telephones have replaced telepathy basically. Okay,
sure,
so that's why it's called a telephone because it's replacing our telepathy,
mhm,
and so it's like a crutch, like you were saying. It's just like something to replace it. So we pretty much lost. Most people are not in tune with it anymore, at all, and so we kind of have to build those muscles up. Like I do this remote viewing stuff every week. I have a remote viewing target that I talk about on the show on Thursday nights because I work out my psychic muscles all the time.
yeah,
I'm constantly doing that. I think it's important that we all do it, and I encourage everybody to do that.
yeah,
Um, Psychic skills, because that's what these cryptids are doing. That's how they're communicating, is through telepathy, ETs, Bigfoots, dogmen, everything, you name it.
yeah, absolutely. I
Hmm.
think, I mean, that's the next level, and we just haven't gotten there
Yeah.
because we didn't take that path, and so
Mhm.
that's kind of what we're looking into as we go through this. We'll piece together more and more of that leading into the final episode. But it's a lot to take on, so that's why we're launching a Kickstarter next month. To One of the main things I want to do. I mean, we've shot a lot of all the episodes, but a few more places to go. We want to tie in, obviously, some of these broader geological and geographical pictures where this all connects, and then really create some beautiful cinematic short films that are basically spliced throughout the documentary. So we're to show those legends in a way, I don't understand, and this is something that I want to talk to someone about. Why is the media avoiding Bigfoot so hard? Like, why is we don't get it's very suspicious to me. I was thinking about this today. We don't get a lot of high quality Bigfoot content out of
Mhm.
Hollywood or any sort of major production houses. Why aren't we? I mean, why are we getting like,
Yeah.
and let's talk outside of the independent world. Why are we getting such like just, every once in a while we get tossed one Bigfoot show bone, that's half decent. And then a lot of other stuff is just sensationalism, and that's fine. It's entertainment. But as far as like a real look at this subject, even UFOs have gotten a lot more like some more serious looks at this subject, trying to really put it all together. I mean, look at Ancient Aliens. That's been on forever, and that's really tied a lot of stuff. It's brought a lot of great information, together and pulled it all into one place. Um, but Hollywood just avoids Bigfoot. And I feel like it's such a big brand. It's free. There's no licensing. It's not Marvel. It's not a Marvel character. It's Sasquatch. Nobody owns Sasquatch. It's in public domain. So it seems like such a gold mine for Hollywood to actually put some money in, but nobody really is doing it. So it's very suspicious. I mean, it's very weird. Why wouldn't Hollywood do it? But you have since 1996, you've had open CIA operations in Hollywood, shaping media.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
Going
you
on.
know what? It's okay. So I'm going to have our good friend Nick Sylvester on my show next week. Okay, he's coming on Wednesday, y'all. Coming back, and he's got some good insider information on some, government involvement with Bigfoot and stuff like that. Special agencies, Space Force, you name it. So we're
Right.
going to get into we get into those conversations when he comes on the show because there's a lot of government involvement in Bigfoot. Okay,
I'm
and of course
absolutely sure there
UFOs
is.
too, right?
Yeah. I mean, people always say we've never found a Bigfoot. I'm like,
Yeah, we have.
you think that you like have been told everything at this point in 2025? You think you've been told everything by the government that they've got their hands on? You really still think that? It's crazy.
Right.
It's
Well,
crazier
there's
than
just a
believing in
cover up
Bigfoot.
though. That's what
Of
it is.
course,
It's
but
a
why?
cover up.
Why is it so big? Like they'll make big budget UFO movies. They'll make big. I mean, is it just the Project Bluebeam tie-in? Like they need that. Isn't they need to tell that story for that eventual agenda, or why? I mean, what have we gotten? Harry and the Hendersons, right?
Harry and the Hendersons. That's right. Well, that's a pretty good movie, and at least we
But
got
it's a
that.
great movie, but it's like the only. It's not serious, and it's the only big one,
Yeah,
big
and
budget one,
also,
really.
well, and Trey, also, like whenever they interview people, like bless his heart, is it Tim Peeler? Was that his name, out of North Carolina? He's friends with my buddy Don Tart, who's on my team, and so he was interviewed, and they usually put someone who is stereotypically very, country, has a, I don't
Yeah,
want to say country, they make us look like a bunch of rednecks is what it is whenever anybody wants to talk about Bigfoot. And
right.
that's on purpose. That is on purpose so that we all keep our mouth shut about it,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think.
why? Why though?
Yeah,
Don't
why?
all your connections. Why don't they want us to know about Bigfoot? Why is I think and that's what my mission is like why what's the big secret, right? Why is it so important that if they can touch on everything else, but
Yeah.
Bigfoot I mean, and that's a reason I got this, Quentin Tarantino says make the movies you want to make. I mean, that's what I'm doing because they don't exist and don't understand why. I don't know why. I figure somebody's got to want to make Bigfoot stuff. But anyway, so yeah, we're gonna try to really show these. Like I said, we're doing practical suits for different Bigfoot types. But when we do like the Okefenokee Swamp, and did I say that right?
Okefenokee, you did.
Okefenokee Swamp in
Yeah.
Georgia story. We'll do a Bigfoot type specific based on witness sightings in that area. Um, and I've got a great uh, uh, forensic artist working on that with us to sort of reconstruct these different types, and then we'll run molds, and then we'll run appliances, and then we'll have these sort of unique different Bigfoot types to show about everyone that's actually it's actually been created. It's not bad CGI. It's not AI. It's a real person in a real suit, a lot of prosthetics, and maybe some animatronics.
I remember the last time we talked. I think it was the last time. You were talking about your friend in the Bigfoot suit, Biggin, right? He's got his own
Right.
Instagram page. Okay.
Yeah, he does.
So you were talking about how because we're talking about how people don't always see Bigfoots, or they can be right out in the open. I remember you telling a story about how.
Right. So yeah,
Yeah,
we
tell
took
us about
him.
that.
Yeah, we were doing it wasn't even an earlier iteration of the suit. I think, but we were on a busy street. We just took him out right outside we were working out of a warehouse at a very busy intersection in Greenville, South Carolina. Uh, and we were doing the test makeup, and I was like, let's just walk outside and stand at the road and see what happens. We're talking, it's probably like we've been doing this all day. It's probably like 4 or 5 o'clock, heavy traffic, and nobody, I would say 5% of the people actually maybe saw him standing there, just standing on the side of the road, giant 7.5 foot tall Bigfoot, and everybody's on their phone, they're driving, they're looking ahead, they're looking at the radio, they're zoning out, whatever it might be. Um, but they're not paying attention to what's around them, that's for sure. So imagine if you're flying down the highway, people are probably going, 15 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour because they're in heavy traffic. Um, Imagine you're going 70 miles down the highway and this thing's standing in a tree line, on the side of the interstate. You're not going to see it. You'd never see it. So it's it's an interesting thing to study, that aspect of the human condition when it comes to this phenomenon as well.
It is, and it's just, but it shows you that they can be standing right in front of you. And we talk about this a lot. I do tracking courses and camouflage awareness courses and things like that amongst my teammates. We've been doing. I haven't done one in a while, but occasionally we'll do those, and it's wild because one person will go out and hide, and the rest of us will have to go search for this person, or vice versa. You know, I'll go hide somebody, they'll go trying to find me, and the masters of the camouflage, okay,
Right.
are the ones that just sit right there, right off the trail, right in front of you, and you just walk right past them, and you don't even see them.
Yeah.
There's an art
There's
to
a
that.
story, I can't remember the lady's name now, but there's a story from like 1908 of a Native American woman when she was young, and she's just walking down a path after picking some berries in the Pacific Northwest, and a hand just comes out from the bushes, grabs her, takes her for, I think he put like tree sap over her eyes, which was like a really scary visual to think about. But he put like black tree tar over her eyes so she couldn't see where she was going, and took her into some cave on some mountaintop and kept her there. Got her pregnant, and then she was like basically dying from the pregnancy. So he took her back to her village, and she survived or whatever. But
Mhm.
I think the baby was stillborn. But interesting, it was written about in a lot of newspapers and stuff. And there's photographs of her as an old woman, still telling the story, saying it was true. But yeah, I mean, that really standing still thing, that ability to be really still, I mean, it's just another amazing adaptation for a apex predator, right? And that was
Mhm.
what, on top of the mind control aspect of it, they talk about Sulcaloo and that race of giants, just snatching up 300, 400 pound, whitetails and snapping their necks with like one hand, throwing them over the shoulder, walking off. Um, I've got a great video. One of the first videos I posted, I think. I mean, a lot of people don't think it's great, but I've looked at it pretty closely on a 60-inch screen in my editing system, and it's clearly some like reddish brown, tall. We have like two types in the Carolinas typically that, especially in South Carolina, it's like a smaller black chimp looking thing. And then we have a taller, lanky, red haired. Uh, those are like kind of the two main type sightings that we get. And this was definitely like a tall, lanky, red haired, uh, Bigfoot-like creature with a conical head, and had a buck thrown over his shoulder with a broken neck. Or you couldn't really tell. Once I zoomed in, it was, it's at twilight. Someone's taking it with a cell phone. It's walking really far away. Um, but when I zoomed in and did some enhancements, you can definitely see that this deer has a wound on his neck. I would say it's probably a snap neck with some bone coming through the skin. And he just carried it over his shoulder through fairly uneven ground and pretty dense tree line. With all the work we've done so far, I can tell you, like, that's not probably going to, and you're carrying 300 pounds of deer on your over your shoulder, like
Yeah.
that, then you add that to it. And like, at what point does Occam's razor cut in our favor,
Mhm.
that a skinny looking guy is carrying a 300-pound deer on his shoulder in a
No,
Bigfoot suit for no reason. Nobody made any money off of it.
you're
Video
right.
doesn't have that many views. It's like, I mean,
Yeah,
on YouTube where the original source was. Um,
you got to have
man,
common sense. Your common sense has to kick in at some point. And with people like yourself and you guys doing these experiments and making your own suit and going out and just putting yourselves out there and getting the footage, just creating data basically for the research world. Um, I got to say, I think that's why those women love the Bigfoot guys, because they are fierce hunters and they've
yeah.
kept them good and fed. Okay,
Well,
warm and fed.
that was the story of Sulcaloo, is he kept bringing the deer. He was a great hunter. That's what she was looking for.
I mean, aren't we all just looking for a
I
great
mean,
hunter? I don't know. I'm just saying.
I think that's the trend we're headed back towards, the old ways.
Yes. I think that's a
Uh,
good thing. I think that's a good thing. We're gonna have to go get our own deer meat and stuff now.
yeah.
Most people.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, if it's well, it's a good kill. It's good meat.
Yeah, it's very good meat. I like some venison chili and stuff. I eat it. I pretty much eat anything though. And yeah, Nighthawk. We got William Nighthawk in the chat. What's up, William? He says they can make you see what they want you to see, too. Whoa.
Sure. I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
I mean, if they Was he making himself prettier with his telepathy? You know, like projecting. What was he doing for these girls? What are they
Here.
seeing? You know, it's interesting.
Right?
I think it's
Yeah.
it's pretty wide open as far as what the possibilities are. I think it's more interesting to have questions than it is to have answers. You know, chasing questions that we may never get the answers to. It's really the journey we're on. I don't think we're necessarily going to get the answers. And if you're all about just having answers, it's not going to be a great time for you. I think in this world of research, you just keep digging. You're going to find another hole. You know, it's chasing the dragon, but
Mhm.
it's fun. You know, and you're expanding your mind. There's so many things about the subject that I think we're better for having it in our lives. You know, it can inspire a lot of different, you know, whether it's being outdoors, spending more time in nature, you know, getting more fit so you can be out in nature and chase Bigfoot, um, you know, exploring more technology, human origins, all the historical research that you can do. Life's a lot more interesting with Bigfoot in it. And I think if it can't hurt, you know, it's so sad that people just want to turn it off because they don't even want to think about it because it's
Not
such a,
me.
yeah, there's
Not
a
me.
lot of people though. There's a lot of people. Just go to the
There are,
comments section.
but you know, Trey, I'm seeing that it's way more accepted today. You know, I started doing my Bigfoot field research back in 2011, and I kept it a secret. I didn't tell anybody for 10 years. My few friends that knew, and I had a lot of friends back then. Okay, but they would make fun of me and thought it was crazy. Of course, they thought it just lined up with me, my personality at the time. You know,
Right, yeah, yeah,
but they thought it was kind of crazy, and I did get made fun of quite a bit. And so I didn't. And I worked in government too, so I just told people I was going camping.
right.
I didn't say I was chasing a big hairy Bigfoot through the woods. You know, every time I'd go out.
Yeah, it
But so
definitely,
it's way more widely accepted now than it was
yeah.
back then.
Well, it's fun. I mean, I think people need to have fun with it. I mean, enjoy it. It can add a lot to your life. Just chasing the subject or any, you know, any sort of mystery. It's life's more fun than
Mhm.
mystery life.
It is. It is.
And
I was gonna. Oh, go ahead.
it's an
Sorry.
excuse for a lot of, you know, a lot of great things.
Yeah. Adolf has an interesting point here. He says at Courtright Reservation, he lives in California, by the way, and has had Bigfoot activity, dogman. He's encountered dogmen, and he's got a documentary on his experience called 10-11-02, where he and his two buddies were camping, and they had an alien abduction experience too.
Oh,
It's
wow.
wild out there. California is wild. Oh my gosh, with all the activity. Okay, at Courtright Reservation, as we hiked, we found a deer with a head that was twisted backwards. Neck was broken, no blood at all. It was between two builders. Also, two legs were broken. I guess boulders probably.
Yeah.
Two legs were broken. As we looked at it better, I mean,
Yeah.
could it have been a Bigfoot probably or Dogman or something?
Yeah, I
Um,
would only, I guess the only thing I would ask if I was investigating that site would be like, could it have fallen from somewhere and landed between the
yeah,
boulders? That's what did, but not knowing any more than that, how would you know, right? But yeah, I mean, I definitely think they actually did the math on um, protein from a average size white-tailed deer, like what how much protein that would produce, and what would something at you know, if you say you had a pod of five at 700 to 800 pounds each, just averaging here, like what would the how long would a deer feed them? And I think it came out to about like one deer a day. Like if they got one deer a day, a pod of like five Bigfoot at like 800 pounds each would be living all right,
whoa,
on like what should be your average protein goal, for a human like creature, so gram to 2 grams per pound of body weight, I think would be about
wow.
where they were sitting. So, all they need to get is a deer a day and you can feed like five of those guys.
Oh my God, I never even thought about that. But like a bear would eat a bunch of food in the spring and summer, then hibernate, right? And throughout the winter, or eat a bunch of food, I guess, in the fall, so he could
Right.
hibernate throughout the winter. But yeah, Bigfoots they seem to come out all year long. Today I was out in the woods. It's still winter, right? So there was something out there. I mean, I'm not going to say it was Bigfoot, but this is where we get a lot of Bigfoot activity out there. And it's a great time to be out in the woods right now. It is not deer season out there anymore, I don't believe. And so it's a little bit safer to go out in the woods right now. But nonetheless, your costume that you guys have with Biggin, I would not recommend taking him out there in the woods where we go, because there could be somebody out there that might shoot him, right?
Yeah, yeah, we've been shooting on private land for most of the B-roll type stuff for that reason, to avoid him getting shot. We can tell
Shot.
everybody in the area to we're out filming. It's unfortunate because I feel like with the amount of equipment that's out there, someone wouldn't be so stupid to shoot him. I mean, we're obviously filming. The lens I'm using is like 3 feet long, but you never know. Someone might just get him. So we do have to be careful with that.
For sure. We just have a question. Let's see, where did it go? I think someone was asking about. I can't find it now. Okay, but it was about. Is there a connection between Bigfoot and UFOs? I think was the question, or there's a statement maybe, because whenever I've been out in the field from the very first time, I don't know if there was a direct connection to the UFOs and the Bigfoots, but there were UFOs in the environment when we were having Bigfoot activity. So is that something that you have thought about covering on your docuseries? Or
For sure. I mean, that's
yeah.
There are cases of Bigfoot being seen coming out of UFOs. People will immediately equate that to Bigfoot having been the pilot of the UFO, or Bigfoot were pilots of the UFO. But if they're abducting humans and cows and elk and everything else, why wouldn't they abduct a Bigfoot? But what is a UFO? Here we go again. Like, what at this point? What even is that? Where are we going with that? So there's, we'll definitely, that's definitely where we're looking into that when it comes up, and then when we're looking at sort of the larger conspiratorial aspects of all of this, because it's all tied in. And like I was getting at earlier with like the TV shows, like I would love to talk to some people that have been on those for like long term, and I doubt they would even know or even necessarily have realized if it was, but especially if they weren't on a high level of production. But to what extent is that being shaped by intelligence? Are those scripts having to go through the CIA Hollywood office or whatever? Like, how are they? And then when we get into things like UFOs and Bigfoot and other phenomenon, lake monsters, all that kind of thing, I've been thinking a lot lately about dinosaur ghosts. There's this meme about, I'm going to go to bed early tonight, and then the person's up looking at their phone, like Googling, why don't dinosaurs have ghosts or something like that. And it really got me thinking about Nessie and energetic portals. We talked about a little bit earlier about the thinning of the veil, and are there sort of electromagnetic anomalies that create these things? And if you look at like ley line maps, they intersect right in front of Loch Ness. There's 2 ley lines that intersect right in front of Loch Ness, which is interesting because we know bodies of water have been seen as portals quite a bit for USOs, UFOs, and other things. So if we're looking at quantum physics and the recent sort of discoveries that are kind of telling us that time doesn't exist, or as we perceive it, it doesn't exist, that it's all happening at once. Are there disruptions in time or in time space where we're just at the right place at the right time, and we're seeing through the veil, and maybe that's why we're seeing all these different things occur, all these different phenomena in the same place at the same time, because the veil is just thin and we're seeing a lot of different dimension time. I mean, all the timelines, all these different things, different times on our timeline. Um, I think that explains so much in regards to ghost ships and, all these different, there's a Bigfoot that's seen in a castle in Scotland all the time, but it's basically a gray-haired giant. And that castle is also kind of right there in that Loch Ness ley line intersection. Uh, so what impact we're having all these solar storms. We know like tonight we have a planetary alignment, right? A big planetary alignment.
Yep.
What is all this? How is all this kind of thing? How does it affect our reality? We know our entire reality is basically electromagnetic, right? We know we only see like what one, I think 0.0035, blah blah. Some ridiculously small number of the visible light spectrum is what we actually perceive as human beings. I feel like there's a lot more going on, and maybe there's just certain times where the conditions are right for us to see these different things occurring that may be
Yes.
occurring all around us all the time, and it's just
We just don't see it.
that moment you're in the
Yeah.
right place at the right time.
I totally agree with that. And I want to go back to the ghost thing that you said, because I have experienced this myself. Okay. Well, first of all, there's a very famous video that was on TikTok and all over social media. It's called the Fort Pierce Dogman. And it was a fella named Blue. He was on his phone. He was on his phone on a Facebook Live, and he was freaking out. I think he was smoking like cigarettes and stuff. And he was like, y'all, you won't believe what I just saw in my yard. And he goes, I'm just going to open up the door and show you and see if it's out
Is
there.
it one under a street light or like
Yes. Yes.
it looks like a booger light kind of outside?
Yeah, it was a street lamp. He opened up the door, and it looked like, to me, it looked like the ghost of a dog man. It was like transparent. You could kind of see it. Well, it started making me question, like, are cryptids, can they be ghosts too? Like, are there ghosts? Are they just interdimensional? Like, what is going on with that?
What are ghosts, like, because, our ghosts, we have the residual energy aspect of that. You have the sort of like intelligent hauntings. You have, things that may just be a peek through the veil. It's just, we're just seeing through at that particular time something that's maybe happening in that time, in this time, because there is no time, right?
Right.
So yeah, and then you have the residual energy aspect of ghost thing, which I think is interesting. There was a pool hall in Hollywood where these investigators basically put sound recorders in this old pool hall overnight, and they got the sound of pool balls clacking, and they tried to reproduce the sound with modern pool balls, and the sounds didn't match. So they had to go get an antique ivory set of pool balls, played a game, and the sounds match. So you have that residual energy where it was just like pool balls cracking for decades in this one place, and there's like frequencies that just like embedded themselves in the structure, it seemed like. But then you have things that are like interdimensional. You have things that are, like I said, possibly just peeking through the veil into another time. I think in some cases it's just it's thin right there, and you're just seeing something else. I have an aunt and uncle that own a really old antebellum plantation home that they bought. It wasn't in our family. They're retired teachers with no kids, so they had some money, and it was like a dream thing they wanted to do. It was like a money pit. So, but that place is super haunted, and you hear people walking around. You'll be there by yourself. You'll hear people walking around all the time. You're like literally searching the house. Nobody's there. There's nobody's cars there. You're trying to figure it out. But again, the graveyard's right behind the house, and everybody that ever lived in the house is buried in that graveyard. So, I think some places just have, also, what are there energetic things that can occur in those places that open that or thin that veil? So
yes, portals. Well, in what I'm finding, a lot of haunted places I go, there's a lot of ritualistic stuff going on there. And if it's a plantation, there was, because you got to bring, you don't have to, but I like to look at every angle of stuff. And if it's a plantation, there might have been some sort of slavery potentially going on there, or people that might have practiced some
Slave
sort of.
cabins.
Okay, so there must have been maybe some form of like voodoo hoodoo stuff going on, or some
You
sort
know
of
that
ritualistic stuff.
there's cabins. I went out to the cabins. They were used as slave quarters at one point, and they were used for moonshine stills at another point. And you could read like cattle prices because they had like insulated the walls with old newspapers. You could read cattle prices through like hundreds of like 100 years of cattle prices on the walls. But
Wow.
there was that. There was also it was also used as a Union and Civil War or Union and Confederate hospital at different points. So a lot of people died there during the Civil War. So yeah, I think probably those kinds of situations you can have places where uh, there's a lot of energy going on, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Well, speaking of a lot of energy too, I actually did an investigation up in Tennessee this past year, and we got called out to a couple's home who had just bought this cabin sight unseen in a land that belonged to the Choctaw Native Americans, and it had a cave behind their house, like 30 feet from their back door. There was a cave entrance. There was multiple cave entrances, and there's voices coming out of the caves, and a lot of high strangeness. Let's just say, and things were creepy for the couple for a while, and it got really bad when their chickens started going missing, and they got upset. They had Sasquatch like figures and Dogman like figures on their cameras outside of their house, and they called me and our friends. We came up there for an investigation. A big old team of us went up there, and we didn't. Okay, there was a lot of activity going on there, but the most interesting thing that happened was, we talk about ghosts. We talk about could there be maybe even things tied to the land, but she
Elemental spirits.
elemental spirits, and she didn't know what the real history of that land was till she did some digging after they started having paranormal activity. She found out that that land was Choctaw land, and a shaman, a medicine man, had banished multiple, let's just say S walkers, okay, because a lot of people say you don't say that word too often, right?
Okay.
S walkers into that cave behind her house, and it was
great.
widely known. Yeah,
Right.
but she just didn't know until they moved there, and so we went to go do an investigation of what was taking her chickens, and if we could find some tracks or just whatever we could find to try to help the family out, and maybe
Wow.
try to seal it up or do something. I don't know what we were going to do, honestly, if we had come across some of that stuff. But
That's a lot to do.
it was a lot, and when we got there, Farrah's her name, and Farrah had like an SLS camera. I took my ghost hunting equipment too. I usually take it on Bigfoot trips and stuff, but yeah, you use the same kind of equipment across all the different types of investigations. But we got there, and she had an SLS camera. And for people who are listening or watching, if you don't know what an SLS camera is, it's if you watch Ghost Adventures or the Ghost Hunter shows, it looks like it's called kinetic, some kind of kinetic. You can use it like on your PS5 or your PlayStations and stuff.
Right.
It maps out your
Motion
body.
tracking. Right.
Yeah, it looks like you look like a stick figure. Okay, so it picks up what looks like stick figures in the camera, and if there's a ghost there, it's going to look like a stick figure. Okay,
Right.
and so we're hanging out at the entrance of the cave at some point one of those nights that we were out there, and we had the SLS camera going, and I had a REM pod out there, and a REM pod is just something with like a little antenna, and it beeps if something gets close to it. And we're watching through this SLS camera, and we're recording it. Farrah was recording it, and a giant came crawling out of the cave. And it had two little figures with it too. And the little figures were crawling down the side of the cave. And the big one just came through a hole, like a cavern. And it looked like it had horns on its head. And it literally looked like something off of a petroglyph or a hieroglyph or some kind of glyph that's in a cave that has like a large giant with horns on its head. That's what it looked like. And so we started thinking, well, is this another dimension? Is there a threshold right here, like at the mouth of the cave? Or is it a ghost? Or what is it? I don't know.
There was nothing physical. It was just.
No. You could just see it through the SLS. I mean, it was a really weird feeling. It was really odd. Yeah. But it
Yeah.
interacted with us. All three of them did.
Wow.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
was the interaction?
Well, the two little ones were jumping on the REM pod and spinning around the antenna like they were dancing on it and stuff. We actually had the video. I have to send you a link to all the videos. It was great. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They left at some point. They went back and they crawled back into the cave and left.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have to consider and not necessarily in that case, but just in general, when it comes to all these various creatures, we're finding that inner Earth is one of the least explored places on the planet, but it exists and it's huge. There's oceans there. There's probably huge caverns. I mean, there could be whole massive ecosystems underneath those. Underneath the crust that we live on. I mean, basically a whole other world. And then, I mean, if you just, what is the sort of internal sun that we have in our own planet? What is the core, the electromagnetic force and energy field that's created by the core of our own planet doing to warp that veil in inner Earth? If you get closer to it geologically, is that affecting reality in any way? Is that opening portals in the cave? I mean, the cave is this huge metaphor throughout, philosophy, if you will, and human folklore. But is there something to that? I mean, scientifically, is there any precedent that could be seen there?
There could be.
I mean, a lot of stuff could be coming out of inner Earth. A lot of stuff.
It could be. Now, William Nighthawk says, frequency and vibration attracts cryptid activity in cemetery and graveyards. Now, I actually consulted with William before I went to that S Walker cave to get information of just some consultation on what to do when we encounter things like that, and how to protect ourselves if we can, and things like that. Yep. And it was pretty wild. But he was on my show last week, and we were talking, or this week actually. And we were talking about why cryptids are so, like Bigfoot and Dogman, for instance, they're seen so often around cemeteries and sacred land. And he had the most interesting explanation for that, and said that even after the body dies, it still emits a frequency. And those Bigfoots and the Dogmen, whatever's out there, they're attracted to that. And so they want to go kind of harness that energy, even after death.
That's interesting. Yeah. Some residual energy going on there. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think at some point in the adaptation of larger organisms, that the humanoid form is optimal for terrestrial existence. If you look at Dale Russell's dinosauroid hypothesis, he was a famous paleontologist in the 80s and 90s, and he took this one small, 3-foot tall raptor type dinosaur and hypothesized that if it hadn't died, which it technically shouldn't have because it's fed on small mammals that we know didn't die in the mass dinosaur extinction, that it would have evolved into something that looked a lot like a reptilian, or somewhere. His forensic reconstruction was somewhere between a reptilian and a gray alien. So if you give them, be crazy and give them 20 million years to evolve into that, they still have 40 million years to mess around on the planet and leave the planet, come back, figure out everything we've never figured out, never will, maybe. Would give those sort of, so that's sort of, he sort of posits this amazing precedent for reptilians. And then, if you think about it in that sense, what other types of organisms could have evolved into something bipedal? A canine type ancestor, perhaps for Dogman. I tend to think that perhaps, I think we saw a type 4 on those Bigfoot types you put up, and it looked kind of like a baboon. There was a large baboon ancestor that stood pretty tall, I think about 6 feet, that was called Dinopithecus. Yeah, that one on the bottom right. and it kind of looks like a dog, right? So if that was tall and walking upright, it kind of has a dog-like snout. So I think some dogman accounts, the Beast of Seven Shoots to me looks a lot like
Mhm.
a large bipedal Dinopithecus would look like after a few million years of evolution
Mhm.
into something more humanoid. But you could have had a canine too. I mean, they've been around for a long time, canines, and I believe like a lot of whales have a similar common ancestor, which is interesting when you think about how they communicate. Um, and that they travel in packs, basically. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff out there that we don't know, and just gotta stay on the hunt, right? You gotta,
On the hunt, man. I'm always on the hunt, and
right? I know you are.
looking for the I'm up against the masters of the hunt, though. Do you think I'm ever gonna? I mean, I get some pretty good activity when I'm out there. We usually do get some pretty good activity, but I'm up against the best when I'm out there. So, but
Yeah,
but see,
it's not a competition, right?
yeah,
We're,
well, I've got
we're
some
all
extra
out
tools
there
under my
with the
belt.
same goals.
That's right. But I have been trained pretty extensively in psychic abilities and stuff like
Yeah,
that. So I have an edge, and I am very fully aware spiritually of how important spirituality is when it comes to communicating with cryptids as well, and about having your mind right, your spirit right, your whole body, your health right, so that your body is vibrating on a higher frequency, because you're
yeah,
more likely to encounter them and to communicate with them if you got a high vibe tribe.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
at least that's what I
I
think.
mean, they're probably not all high vibing. There's got to be some low
No,
vibing
oh no, they're
ones,
low vibe, man. There's
but
not.
that doesn't
They're
mean you
they're
won't
all
see
over
them.
the place.
The higher your vibe and the low vibes will probably want to come suck your
Mm.
energy, right?
Ooh, well, that's in everyday life. That's humans too.
Yeah, the
All that
vampires,
loose, right?
all the
Uh,
loosh. Yeah,
Right. That's my favorite word. My friend Barry's in the chat right now. He always laughs when I say loosh. It's a thing though. That's what the reptilians live off of, right?
I mean, they're making a lot of negative energy. It seems to be for some
Oh
purpose.
man. Well, I think that everything in our environment right now, like the news, let's say the news media, like mainstream media, I don't watch TV hardly at all. At all. Like I'm too busy to even watch TV. But when I do, it's so depressing. It's like I've ever since we were kids, like you turn on the TV and it's like homicides and it's nothing good. Like it's nothing
Yeah,
good.
it's not. I think about this all the time. It's not, and it's why I got into what I got into, and then working in a pretty, some pretty high level people in Hollywood for a while. I've worked on some pretty big projects, and it, it's not meant. It's a powerful tool. It's not the tool's fault. It's the people that are, you know, the tool is powerful. The media can be used for a lot of good. I think that's what a lot of us are trying to do is use it for
Mhm.
more high vibe stuff. Um, but it's a lot easier to keep people in control when you're pushing a low vibe through the media. And you can even see that, they've changed the frequency that music is made at.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, visuals are powerful. I mean, you're watching TV, it's basically sigil magic, really high level sigil magic. Some marketing
Emojis.
tools.
I just saw that emojis are like high level sigil magic too. I never
Yeah.
knew that.
And
Emoji?
spelling words, it's all. I'm sure you've looked into Dr. Emoto's work with water, where he put different, water words on water vials. Saw how it's shaped. Always, what is that where praying over your food came from to
Yeah.
like change the sort of energetic structure before you eat it.
And then take a curse off of it too. I mean, I don't look at potlucks the same anymore. I mean, with my family, it's one thing, but going to an
Talked to a lot
event
of people
where you
about this in the last couple of holiday seasons. I feel like it's like
yeah,
not wanting to eat other people's food.
dude,
You
I'm
don't know
not
what
eating
they.
anybody's spaghetti.
I
Sorry.
mean, even if they weren't cooking, like putting rat poison in it, or were they in a bad mood? Were they stressed
Oh my
out?
God.
Were
Oh
they,
my God.
are they just
I
horrible
actually,
people in general? I grew up in the church, so I had to like eat, do that
yeah.
every Sunday basically. And it's,
Yeah, and people
when you
letting
think
their
about that
cats up
now.
on the table and like getting in their casserole dish while they're cooking. And I know I'm not trying to gross everybody out tonight, y'all. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. You gotta think about
Right.
that kind of stuff, right, Trey?
Yeah, I mean, just that, and then we've got, I just saw somebody sent me something about the black takeout containers are like really
Hmm.
terrible. They're made from like recycled like computer keyboards, probably full of graphene and stuff. They're full of all
Gross.
this tox. It's like you get anything, and I was like, oh, being into fitness and that kind of thing. It's like I don't order from them personally because I cook all of my own food, but like the food prep places are all putting their food prep meals out in these black plastic containers, and they're probably even promoting them as being like a recycle. We use recycled containers, but they're recycled from really toxic stuff, and you're like heating up this food in the radiation machine in this your old computer keyboard uh, black to go container. So yeah, we're being poisoned on all ends. We really gotta get back to being more like Sasquatch, And I really think that that's with Squatch Me Now. The documentaries are a big piece of it for me, but um, I'm working with an artist named Nick Pizarro out of Australia. He's sort of my art director right now, and he actually did this as a piece of branding sticker. We don't have the tumbler yet; it's just a sticker, but it's a design. We're doing some new merch and sort of some rebranding and sort of trying to expand this more into a lifestyle brand based around the concept of living more like Bigfoot or more like a relict uh, hominid, relict human. How can we get back to sort of like organic minimalism, I guess you might say, and even within this world that we find ourselves, how can we can still adapt that to the gym. You can still adapt that to the grocery store if you have to. Not everybody, we're not going to go out and necessarily hunt deer with spears, but how can we, there's a famous quote that says, walk not in the footsteps of the masters, but seek what they sought. And I think that that's really kind of like, how can we, when people describe Bigfoot, most of the time, they're talking about something that's very athletic, very lean. They're probably eating a lot of protein, wild berries, wild herbs. These are the things that we're fine. If you look at even like the average migration distance daily for an early hunter gatherer, you're talking about the same amount of steps that doctors are telling people to take today, like 10,000 steps a day, equates to approximately the mileage of a hunter gatherer. So we really need to go back and look at like how we're pre-civilization crutch people living, because the more we crutch on civilization, the more that perpetuates itself. That's why people are 60 years old on 50 medications and all the problems. We got to get back to a more natural lifestyle.
Mhm.
But how can we have to hybridize that because we're not going backwards. So how can we hybridize that into um, being more in touch with nature, still incorporate the technology, but do it in a healthy way, still incorporate, fitness, food, meditation, telepathic, spiritual, mental exercise, um, all these kinds of things. So that's sort of the broader uh, scope. And when it comes to the education aspect, we're looking at some content tailored specifically for kids. Might bring Biggin into that, might not, but um, some YouTube presence that's just tailored specifically for kids, but focused around Bigfoot and how can we educate. So I don't know. I think your kid's a little bit older. I have a 4-year-old, and the content out there for these kids is so annoying.
It's, yeah.
It's
I have a
really
10-year-old.
obnoxious, and I
Yeah.
feel like we can do some really great stuff with sort of the Bigfoot archetype and make it very educational, and still fun. And you know, do you have that picture of my son in the back of the truck with Big N?
Ooh. Is that your son?
Yeah, he loves it.
Oh, great.
He loves Bigfoot, and we take Big N out to festivals and events all the time. We were at BlurryCon and the Westminster Bigfoot Festival. We've been to the American Bigfoot Festival. If anybody wants Big N at your event, please let me know. We'll try to put it on the schedule for 2025. But kids you just see it on their face, and they're very few are scared, which is very interesting to me. Very few kids are scared. He'll pick up little babies, tiny little babies. They'll let him hold him. Kids love this stuff. You just know they're going to go to school and tell everybody they met Bigfoot that weekend,
Real Bigfoot.
So I think it's fun for them, and it's a great venue. It's a great sort of way to tap into kids and teach them a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of another aspect of this sort of greater lifestyle brand we're working on. Sort of bring these sort of ideas to a larger group, and not everybody may be interested in all aspects of it, but I think they can find interest in the broader scope of the subject, and how it's tailored sort of different lifestyle stuff.
Yeah, well, kids are all about Bigfoot right now, and I'd mentioned earlier that back when I first started Bigfooting back in 2011, it was not mainstream. People weren't talking about it. It was a very undercover type of a thing I was doing. Okay. When it came to all this, I never in a million years thought I'd go public. But now, you go to places like, I always use the example of Cheehaw, Alabama. Cheehaw, I guess it's a state park. I don't remember. But you go and there's like a guard shack, or like a house where you go check in to go, if you want to get a campsite or whatever. And you walk in there and it's wall to wall Bigfoot memorabilia. It's like plushies and keychains and magnets, stickers for your car, you name it, t-shirts, shorts, pajamas. It's all Bigfoot. Everything.
People love Bigfoot. It's a great thing. We need to make it's the time for this community to really like step up and make it not silly. It doesn't mean that it can't be fun. It doesn't mean that it can't be fun, but it's time for like sort of a higher level approach, I think, to this concept. And with the UFO thing, disclosure coming, however that's going to play out, and everything else going on, I think people are going to be much more open. And you're definitely right. I mean, I've been into this since I was a baby. So, I mean, I've been getting razzed for liking this kind of stuff my whole life, but it's totally worth it. It's such a fun thing to chase, subject matter wise. So yeah, I mean, I had a UFO sighting at 9, and that woke me up to a lot of possibility. I still don't know what it was. It was a big dark disc, but what. But that made me just realize there's a lot going on in this world that most people weren't tapped into.
Wow. So you started young. You're like me. Actually, when I was a little kid, I used to sit out in my front yard. I lived on a farm, and I would look for UFOs at night, all the time. I mean, I think I was trying to get them to come pick me up, take me home.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah,
get out of here.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's been I think probably early 2000s. I mean, obviously my whole life I was into Bigfoot, but probably started doing the heaviest research probably early 2000s. And then I really enjoyed Legend Meets Science, that book, and then the documentary that followed. But I just got really burnt out on the whole Gigantopithecus hypothesis, which I feel it's like still to this day, like it's every like larger production that you do get documentary wise on these things, History Channel, whatever, that's always like I have to hear Gigantopithecus at least 20 times in that show. And it's like, why is that even? It's not even that likely. I mean, it's not with all the potential. It could be possibly one hypothesis for one type. But there's just like so little to go on with that whole line. I'm not sure why that particular thing is pushed. I think it's almost like it's the least likely, and that's why they push it so hard. I mean, most descriptions I feel like are not that,
No.
at least what we think it was. And even with that, that's something we have. What we have some teeth found in a Chinese, medicine shop, maybe a jawbone now for the whole Gigantopithecus, thing, which is what we have of most. But I'm just not sure why it's prioritized in the media. I don't know if it's just parroting um, what's been said now for 30 years or longer.
Mhm. I
But
think what I actually think that it is. See, Trey, not everybody has been immersed in Bigfoot like you and I have, and maybe it's just so mainstream that a lot of people just don't believe in Bigfoot at all. There's no way Bigfoot could exist, and so maybe that's just like the gateway into getting people's
yeah, I mean,
mind wrapped around it.
yeah, I mean, but there's just newer discoveries
Mhm.
and newer routes I think to take, and that one's been around for a long time. But I get it. I mean, it's a way to introduce it. But again, that's just where I'm getting to is like I think like okay, we get it. Uh, we get it. That's a possibility. What else is there? Let's look at some other things because a lot of sighting accounts don't really fit that description in any way. And I don't think that based on the timeline of when that supposedly lived to say the Patty sighting, people, I hear that a lot in docs. It's, maybe this evolved into this in 10,000 years. Like that's not how quickly these things work. It doesn't happen quite that fast. Um, so, and Patty, I don't even think is that, maybe for a female, I think that might be an interesting, shape. But a lot of people, you get this like, was she? A lot of people talk about she probably had a young nearby. Is that a
Mhm.
post-pregnancy belly? Does she have young and she's pregnant? Is that due to Bigfoot type have a higher level of GH? Do they have more growth hormone? It would make sense that Bigfoot would have higher growth hormone releases, in their body. If you look at bodybuilders that have that big gut, those big ab
Mhm.
guts, it's like a dead gut, but with like abs on it. That's from like them shooting up way too much GH. So could some
Interesting.
Bigfoot could some Bigfoots have that? Um, from that. Too much, a lot of GH is causing that in their system. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff to look at with the biology of what genetically, triggers hormonal things and all this other stuff that would create a Bigfoot-like creature. Are they higher in testosterone? That would create more body hair, right? Um,
Mhm.
we can't, we can't reverse engineer this with a specimen. We can't look at that specifically. I'm sure someone's done it, um, but we just have to kind of look at humans and think about what that would be like.
I have been told that they look more like a human than anything. Once they're stripped down, let's just say you just took all the hair. If they didn't have any hair on them,
Right.
they just look like gigantic humans. Going back to
Mm,
the beginning of the show tonight, we were talking about, well, what's the difference between a giant and a Sasquatch?
right.
Hair,
Hair.
right?
It's
Hair,
just more body hair. But
just
some
body hair.
giants are hairy, right? Or
Mhm.
in like even in medieval folklore and that kind of stuff, there were some that were a little bit hairier than others. And if we're talking about, I'll really, I said earlier we were talking about how to create a suit. A lot of times the descriptions, if the light's hitting them just right, you can see straight through the hair, right on their body. So if it's a very very light hair, it's just longer than like the average hairy human. I mean, there's some really hairy dudes, you know, some really hairy guys. If that hair
Yeah.
was like long and straight, and then the other thing is what's the thing with the Bigfoot hair? Because we've seen the morphology is different
Mhm.
than human or any other animal. There's not a medulla, right? In a lot of Bigfoot hair, it's like missing that centerpiece. So
There's also chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is another component to their hair as well.
interesting.
Chlorophyll, yeah. Some of the samples, I mean, our team has gotten samples, and we have a wildlife biologist on my teams. He's actually on pretty much all the same teams that I'm on. Okay, Keith's on there. He's been on my show, and he has examined some hair samples that we've obtained, and yeah, I believe there's some chlorophyll in the hair, and of course oil globules. That always comes up. The
I
oil.
find this very interesting because hairs are connected to the nervous system, and they're just basically antenna for electrical signals. If you get spooked, they stand up on your arm. So, is there any relevance to the difference in Bigfoot hair morphology and how it reacts to the nervous system, potential camouflage? I mean, if you're covered in that hair and there's something today called optical camouflage, where there's basically militaries are developing fibers that react to electrical signals and reflect the environment around them, creating essentially like a mirror effect type of camouflage, which is, you have the whole predator, people relating seeing things in the woods to predator. Well, that could very well be one heck of a ghillie suit if it was just, optical camouflage individual threads that are like reacting to a nervous system command, if you will, that's telling it to reflect its surroundings. We're talking about inner earth. If there's ones that live in inner earth, is there any sort of microorganisms that are bioluminescent that are living in their eyeballs that make their eyes glow at night? You hear about this eye shine, but sometimes, which we can relate to other animals we know, but we also hear about an eye glow. And, obviously, if you're living in dark places underground, it might be beneficial to have that. And we have found like bioluminescent bacteria in some really deep caves. So, and we know that we have bacteria in our own eyes. So are we, if you look the right way into the sun, sometimes you can see them floating, or, you get those you can see it almost like from a microscope. So do they have these sort of symbiotic relationship with bioluminescent microorganisms that live in their eyeballs? And that was what caused the eye glow when they come out from the cave at night to hunt, nocturnally.
Oh, that is, I've never even thought of that before. And
that's something I'm really trying to find the people that I can talk to for this doc series. It's been very hard to get people that would be able to talk about these kinds of ideas.
Oh, I got people.
These kinds of ideas.
Oh, I got people for you. I got some in the chat right now that I know personally that would have a great conversation with you about this.
I mean,
yeah,
I'm trying to look at, obviously anybody that's an investigator researching the subject would love to talk to. But I'm mostly talking about evolutionary biologists that could actually be willing to say, from a speculative standpoint, it could happen, or it couldn't happen. I'm fine with either answer. I'm not trying to have the answers. I have all the questions, and I want to talk to people who can talk to me about those questions. It's just about the discussion and sort of a thought experiment.
It's thinking outside of the box, and that's what we do here on this channel. That's what I've always done. Think outside of the box. Nobody's thinking about these things. I mean, I'm sure there are people that are thinking about it. I mean, I think about eye shine, eye glow all the time. I've seen it. I've experienced it. As a matter of fact, I've been really busy. I go speak at Bigfoot events all the time. And last weekend I was at the East Alabama Bigfoot Town Hall down in Appalachia. And a good friend of mine, Flat Rock Wood Boogers, was there.
Right.
He spoke along with Tyler Howell, and you might know Tyler and Flat Rock actually. But he showed us some videos from his property. He's got a house on some land out in South Alabama, kind of, and he was setting up baby monitors around the outside of his house and inside the windows of his home. Because he was getting harassed by this family of Bigfoots that live on his property, like a whole bunch of Bigfoots. And they would just sit there and bang on his house at night and watch him and his mother and you name it. His wife, and he has all these videos that he showed us of their eye glow. And even pictures of like him talking to people outside, and his camera would pick up pictures, and they didn't see it in the background, but the Bigfoots were like behind them while they were talking, just sitting there staring at them, and their eyes were just glowing. It's wild. That's some of the best. I mean, it's so much evidence because there's so many videos of it.
Well, you know,
It's
Alabama's famous for the white thing, and
yeah.
you know that sort of chunk going up into Kentucky and beyond even is some of the most cavernous areas. You know, lots of caverns, lots of caves um, in that part of the world. I mean, a lot of the karst is right there. So um, you would definitely, I mean, a white Bigfoot would definitely be indicative of something that's living underground too. You know, and I have a lot of sightings of white ones. Tennessee, where there's a lot of caverns, Kentucky, where there's a lot of caverns, Pennsylvania, where there's a lot of. So it's very interesting, and you know, talking about tying, sort of just making correlations. It doesn't have to be a direct biological tie, but there's a famous. I don't know if you noticed, but Malta, the island of Malta, was supposedly built by giants,
I did a
and
show on it. Yeah, with my
yeah,
friend. I have a
well,
friend from Malta actually that I did a show on
it's
Space Out
awesome.
Radio with her, and we talked about it. Yeah.
Um, well, Louise Jessup was a British woman that went to Malta in the early 1900s and basically stumbled upon the story of these missing school children. These kids went on a little trip. They were investigating one of the temples there. That there's a lot of evidence to show that they were sacrificing people to something in those temples that had these huge caverns underneath them. Um, and so these school children just went missing. And with their teachers, they all went down there on a field trip. They went down to the caverns. They went missing. Well, this British woman, Louise Jessup, is down there and runs into the story and ends up going down to that same cavern. And she's just got like candlelight, but supposedly saw these giant, white-haired, Bigfoot-like creatures that were like. She said she thought they were like blind. They were acting kind of like they were blind, but they were like grasping out. Um, and the story has some pretty significant. I mean, they've confirmed that she was there. She was in Malta. She was a real person. They've talked to people that interviewed her later in life. It's a very interesting story, but just showing some maybe correlations between these creatures living in caves and what sort of physical adaptations might be for
Mhm.
that. Um,
Mhm.
the more
Mike
you can
Prime says,
add it, and add substance to when you see like actual biological adaptations that are substantiated. Um,
ooh, well, we do have a white Bigfoot that's been reported in North Georgia as well, and we've kind of connected it. I know some of the guys on my team talking about how they think it's really old, and Mike Prime says that white, gray, old, and I think that's the case. I mean, some people want to call these things like albino Sasquatch. Sometimes they could just be old too. You know,
yeah, I
like
mean,
how,
certainly. Yeah. And I mean, I
yeah.
think that's when we're talking about the subject, you know, not getting too specific. I'm not trying to draw direct correlations. I'm just looking at it. I mean, obviously, people will talk about, well, this Bigfoot look like that, this Bigfoot look like that, this Bigfoot's that's not. You know, when you look at a video, someone might be, well, it's not big enough to be a Bigfoot, or it's the arms are too short.
Yeah.
Are we saying that every hominid that adapted in every possible way, or whatever these things are, everyone's going to be exactly the same? Even humans are. And there's massive diversity in the human anatomy, right? Across the species. You know, some people have longer arms, shorter arms, you know, longer torsos, shorter torsos. I think we see some similarities, obviously, amongst, and if you're talking about smaller populations, they're probably going to have more cohesive features, right? Um, but you know, I think that there's a lot of room for them to look different. Obviously, when they age, you know, we see blonde ones, we see brown ones, we see black ones, different skin colors. You know, to me that adds more validity to it. There's diversity amongst, you know, genetic diversity amongst the populations of these things. Um, than if they all were exactly the same. That'd be a little weird, right? So, and
Yeah.
it's even like people be like, it's too small. Well, is it? You know, 10? Is it a baby? Is it a little one? You know, they have to grow. They're not born 7 feet tall. They're not born 10 feet tall. You know, so um, it's funny how quickly people want to jump to say it's fake. That bit of evidence is fake or whatever, because it's hard to say, man. If people are telling me it's real, it's hard, and I can't. I'll try to match. If I see something, I'll say, okay, does that match this suit that I know can be purchased from this Halloween store or whatever, or rented from this rental house in LA, or I'll try to find that stuff before I post the video. I try to vet them. Um, Obviously, if it looks like a really cheap, cheesy gorilla suit from Walmart, I'm probably not going to post that video.
I've seen pictures like that before.
Right, sure, obviously.
Yeah.
But if it's anything beyond that, I'm going to post it and we're going to at least talk about it, because, we're sharpening our skills of discernment. And some people point out sometimes stuff that I didn't notice. I'm like, you know what, you're right. I've had a guy that I posted a Dogman video one time, and this guy from Mexico, I think, it's like a filmmaker. He wrote me. He was like, "Hey, this is me in that. This is our little indie film." And I posted another post and updated the original post saying, "This is this." But in most cases, when people say something's fake, I tend to ask them, "Okay, where's the proof? Where do we see it?" Because otherwise, you're just calling someone a liar that you don't know, and I don't know, and I can't prove that they're lying. And this video looks kind of good, or this photo looks kind of good. And when we're looking into then the art of the hoax, um, we've realized just how hard it can be to try to fake these things. I mean, looking at the Independence Day footage, that's one I always go back to, which is the big
boulders.
black mother walking
Mhm.
down the boulder field. I don't think anyone's ever taken credit for that video, but you've got, we were talking about visibility and difficulty walking and everything in those suits. It's walking down a 45-degree slope and covered in boulders and a Bigfoot suit alone, but then it has a baby in its arms. Either the baby's animatronic or being puppeted by the person. If it's all fake, if it's a hoax, and the creature is looking at the camera the whole time, which people are be like, well, why is it looking at the camera the whole time? It's obviously fake, but it's keeping its eyes on the threat.
Mhm.
It's walking and looking. It's not even looking where it's going. It's walking down this very rough terrain, carrying a baby and staring at the camera. It's very hard to do. I don't think people. It looks simple to people until you actually. A lot of things look simple to people until they actually try to do. And I think that's one of the most compelling videos for me. There's a lot of work put into that suit. If it's a suit, when it goes to the practical effects hoax aspect of that video, it's very expensive. It's already like 25 years old, I think, or 20 years old.
Yeah.
And then just the physicality of it, the ability to do what that creature is doing, it's a lot harder than I think people give those kind of videos credit for.
And it's holding that baby. I mean, that would be putting a baby's, if it's a real baby, let's just say, like if it's a person,
Right.
they'd be
Right.
putting a costume on their baby too and all that stuff. It's a little crazy, but we've had like multiple people asking. So I got to ask you, multiple people in the chat have been asking one after the other, how old do you think Bigfoots live to be, Trey? How old, what is their lifespan?
Who knows? I mean, I feel like, um, bigger animals tend to live shorter lives, right? In theory. But I feel like there's a lot to the concept of how they're living, and are they living in a way that, if you look at all the biohackers now, they're talking about optimizing your mitochondria for energy production and, all these kinds of things. I mean, have they already done that? Do they live that way? Are they living in a way where their bodies are optimized already? And we have, the stories of people, say, pre-flood in the Bible, or, the Bible, a lot of Genesis is taken from ancient Sumerian text and all this stuff. So we're going back further and further. But, those ancient sort of people were said to be giants and live for a very long time. So, were they tuned in a way that they're not coming apart like we are today? I mean, certainly our environment, certainly um, the crutch of civilization only got us so far, and I think we're now devolving to a certain extent. Everything that we're looking to supplement through technology, I think, could be achieved on a more natural path, but not when you've damaged sort of the population this much through constant crutching. So, there's something, and this gets almost controversial, I guess you could say, but there's something to be said for evolution in theory, and evolution itself is controversial, but whether that theory is absolutely correct or not, I think we can see that there is some truth in the evolution of self, whether it's physical or mental or spiritual, whatever, through adversity. It doesn't come through ease. Um, so that also doesn't lend itself to a large population. The population gets cold. The weaker are taken out in winter. If these things moved into the European and Asian northernmost regions hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years before us, and we're up there just killing it, literally, for all that time, they're going to be way more advanced than us in a lot of ways. Uh, if they've sort of developed through that natural adversity of living in those places, they were not in the garden. They were not in this sort of perfect, easy place to be. And so I think that's why they were such a significant force when we weren't just being hunted by saber-toothed tigers. I would say like a 7 foot tall human that's muscled like a chimpanzee and weighs 800 pounds is a much more significant predator than even a saber-toothed tiger. They were preying on saber-toothed tigers. They were there, or at least competing for prey with saber-toothed tigers, and cave bears and all these kinds of ancient megafauna. So they may be super optimized. I think the idea is they're probably more highly evolved than us because they didn't crutch. Well, we think we're the greatest thing because we have technology. We develop technology, but I think we've done a disservice to ourselves as beings. That's kind of crazy to say because it does. There's a lot of great things that come with technology, but I think if you look at it from you really zoom out and look at it from the big picture in the sense of not just my generation or your generation or the next generation or my kids' generation, my parents' generation. We're looking at like 300 years in the future at max. The average person probably not even that. But if you're as a civilization, but I mean, if you're looking at millions of years or thousands of years, the benefit to living in that sort of natural path with Mother Earth, it's probably the right way to be, and probably more beneficial to the individual than the path that we've taken as humans.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a lot more highly evolved in ways that we're not. Like we talked about telepathy,
yeah,
and it could be mitochondrial optimization for energy and all these other types of things. How long do they live? I mean, these are great questions to ask, and we go on forever. I don't think anybody has a real answer. I think if anybody tells you they have a real answer, they're probably maybe don't listen to them because we don't have that answer unless there's some you have some government operative that's had a chance to study these things on some black op. Then we don't know. Even if I saw one tomorrow and got to spend the day with it, I wouldn't know anything about the greater scope of this whole phenomenon, I think, because I don't think one individual would have enough, one day with a Bigfoot wouldn't tell me enough about everything that we're dealing with here. And if I could dissect one with, some biologist, I still don't think we would be able to determine everything we need to know about this phenomenon. It's too big. So, I mean, they're fun questions, but like I said, that's the fun part of this is chasing the questions and thinking about it. And we can all sharpen our brains by asking these questions and going on the thought experiment, but there are no answers, and I don't know that will ever happen. That would be great to have some answers, but I'm living for the questions.
I know, right? Well, I mean, because the more that I'm learning and the more that I get out in the field, and I've been doing this for a while, the more questions I have. Like, I mean, you think that you got something figured out, and then you realize you have nothing figured out the more you are out in the field,
Yeah,
having
I
these
mean,
experiences.
a lot of people still think we're dealing with like one Bigfoot somewhere in Northern California, and then you have people that are like, hey, there's definitely a population, but they're all this thing, they're all Patty or whatever, and they all look like that, and they live out in the woods like Harry and the Hendersons, and
Right.
play with the bunnies. And then there's people, okay, we've got 4 or 5 types, and then, it keeps expanding, but I think it's like exponentially larger than anything we can conceive. And it's all tied into the greater truths of the larger reality that I think, maybe starting to see a little bit peek through in the collective consciousness, but yeah, I don't know. When it comes to this whole technology crutch thing, there's a scene in the Time Machine movie where it's part of the original book where there's 2 different races of humans that exist in the future, and I really feel like, is that where we're headed? Are there going to be, because we're on the cusp of transhumanism, where this crutch of civilization and technology integrates itself with us, and we're not humans anymore. So are we about to see a split where, in a similar way, humans split from other hominins, maybe in the uncanny valley?
In the
Uh,
uncanny valley.
and now
That's
we're
scary.
seeing that split again. Are there going to be humans that can take a more natural, maybe even reject this fully and take a more natural path? And then we're going to have the people that have chips in their brains and put their consciousnesses into toasters and have all these weird robot stuff going on.
I'm team human. Okay. I'm 100% team human. Everybody over here, we're all team human.
Organics.
For sure. We're organics. Yeah. I mean, listen, I've been doing shows on things like artificial humans and the Cabbage Patch and, the incubator babies. And it's a wild, wild world we're living in with all the clones and artificial humans, the homunculus and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
we covered it all.
We're right there. It's coming.
Yeah.
For technology. We're right on the edge, and it's, there's an old Chinese curse that says, may you live in interesting times. And I think we're there.
We are definitely there. I'm there. Listen, I signed up for the wild and crazy ride this lifetime, and I'm here for all of it. And I don't know, but I think I'm definitely here to try to guide go down the path. I don't know if I'm guiding other people. I'm definitely doing it myself. The path of humanism. Okay.
Yeah.
What does it even mean to be human? That's always been a question that comes up in my life. Like, what does it mean to be human? Well, I never in a million years thought that I would live to see the day, but I can't tell who's human and who's not anymore.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I mean, what is it to be? I mean, that's a great question. What is it to be human? And is human defined biologically? Is human defined by the spiritual or energetic force that's in us? From a spiritual perspective, I tend to think that we're spiritual beings on a human journey, or energetic beings on a human journey, and this is avatar body that I'm in. And so, do, do the Bigfoot have that same, are they still in a more, despite having maybe more developed aspects of their brain that help them with telepathy and that kind of stuff? Are they, where are they vibing? Are they vibing in 5D? Are they still in 3D? I mean, what's going on there? I don't know.
They might have brain
But
chips if they've been hanging out with Elon Musk. I don't know. What do you think?
I think, I wrote a bunch of scripts when I was, and it was so funny because like a lot of them actually kind of come true, I guess you might say in some ways. But I wrote a bunch of scripts back in the day once working in the movie business, and one involved Bigfoot, and an aspect of it was cybernetic, brain chipping a pot of Bigfoot. This was something government had done for a specific reason. A bunch of them get captured for that purpose, and a young one gets left behind, and that was an aspect of the film. But yeah, I mean, if you could brain chip a Sasquatch for military purposes, that would be quite the soldier. I mean, there's no way that hasn't been. I feel like there's no way they haven't done that. Like with all the stuff we know they're up to, they haven't snatched one and at least used it for some sort of explored military applications. How they can use that information. I'm sure they have it. I mean, obviously the U.S. government has this information. So what are they doing with it?
I mean, of course,
that's the disclosure I want. I'm more interested in that, to be honest.
Me too. Me too.
We're talking about all this energy stuff right now.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, I don't hear a whole lot of conversation about, we're getting all this UFO disclosure and everybody's complaining about fossil fuels and alternative energy and this and that and the other. We know the government's had 0-point energy for what? Almost pushing 100 years at least. I mean, even the Aztec crash was, I think, the 30s. I mean, Roswell was 47, but I think the Aztec crash was in Aztec, New Mexico, I think was, in the 30s. So they've had this tech for a long time, probably before even that. But nobody's talking about that really. That's not a big point of contention with all this stuff happening. We could fix all the energy problems immediately with the tech we know they have. They're admitting to it. Where's the congressional hearing on giving us free energy, like tomorrow? Right.
I mean, hopefully it's coming. We've got so many changes now.
I get worried. I love what I'm hearing, but always in the back of my mind, it's like, where's the Hegelian dialectic in all of this?
Yeah, well, we got to stay positive, okay? Because if we start thinking like, well, what's the catch? What's the catch? Right. If you think like that, like we're going to manifest it. Yeah, you start manifesting things like that, and we've become so conditioned to have the rug pulled out from underneath our feet every time we get something good. They take it back. They put more lockdowns in and laws to suppress things, and I don't know. Like I'm trying to stay positive about it right now because there's so much coming to light right now, and I do think that we are in a golden era of a lot of different things, and hopefully
we're in the age of Aquarius. So at the very least, we've got. I mean, that's supposed to be the time of the pouring out of knowledge, and I think apocalypse, if you look at the actual definition, is unveiling of hidden truths. That's the actual meaning of apocalypse. So maybe we're in the time of revelations, but it's the revelations of what's behind the veil.
Yeah, I think that you're part of this too. Part of the revelations of what's going on with Bigfoot, with your documentaries, and with all of your social media and everything. I mean, you're doing a pretty good service to the cryptid community by posting that stuff and having a conversation, opening up the lines of conversation on these types of things. And before we go tonight, of course, I know it's already been well over 2 hours. I don't
I
want to
could talk
keep you
about
here
that
all
stuff
night.
forever.
But we could talk all night. I know that we could. And I know I don't want to keep you over, sometimes we'll go 3 hours and I'm like, oh my God, where did the time go?
Yeah.
But I know we had kind of talked about the devil's head. Is that what it's called out of North
Yeah,
Carolina? Do you want to talk about that before we go tonight?
do you have that picture?
I do.
Folder?
Yeah, I
Okay.
sure do.
So,
I got a couple pictures.
so we talked about Judaculla earlier. Judaculla is the Cherokee devil, or Sulkalu, we also talked about. Sulkalu, the Cherokee devil, was believed to have put his handprint on Judaculla Rock. And he leapt from the devil's courthouse and landed on that rock and left that handprint. That's the Cherokee lore, anyway. Well, the devil's courthouse is right above this point in the hike to the top of Devil's Head. And that is the Devil's Head right there. Now, Judaculla or Sulkalu is known as the slant-eyed giant and was described as having a sloped forehead, leading into a conical crown. And to me, I mean, it's very interesting that that's called Devil's Head, and it's in the Devil's Courthouse, which, or right below the Devil's Courthouse, where he was believed to reside. And the Devil's Courthouse is really just a big cave outcropping at the top of this mountain. And another thing I find interesting is if you look at pictures from the Pacific Northwest where they did tribal mask of Sasquatch, he kind of has that same pursed mouth that you can see right there towards the bottom of the boulder, where it's like whistling, or whooping. And so I just, I was hiking up to the top of Devil's Head. And this is before I knew any of this. I just was vacationing in Lake Lure many years ago when I was living in New York, and I came down here to see family, and rented a house in Lake Lure, and I went on this hike, and I was like, wow, it's an interesting sort of shape to that head. And then I just started digging more into the lore about all this, and it was interesting to find. But to me, that looks a lot like the description of Sulkalu, and they certainly call it Devil's Head, and that's where that all comes from. Is the Cherokee Devil? That's where that whole Devil's Head, the mountain, the Devil's Courthouse, all that stuff right there, Lake Lure. That's where it all comes from. So it's an ancient place. These are some of the oldest mountains in the world. I think there's only one mountain range that's slightly older than Appalachia in Africa. Certainly the oldest in Americas. And technically they're all the same because in theory they all work, Pangea. So yeah, I love that rock. It's such a cool looking place. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get any actual Bigfoot near that spot or one of our suits, but definitely filming there and have filmed there, and it's a cool looking place. I would suggest going there. It's interesting just to go sit and get sort of the perspective of the Cherokee Devil from his courthouse. And I would definitely suggest anybody that can go read the story of Sulkalu, who's in Mooney's book, Myths of the Cherokee.
Yeah.
It's such a great story, and it's really a lot longer than anybody ever talks about. But it's a story of a human and a non-human hominin type creature interbreeding, which we have DNA evidence of with Denisovans and humans. We already have that DNA evidence to prove that occurred in history. So, I don't think that there's any doubt in my mind that if the Denisovans were the size of cave bears, which their teeth would indicate, that they could have, migrated to the Americas and could possibly be the giants that, at least some of the giants that we have in the Americas. They would have, in theory, looked a lot like Native Americans. I mean, if you look at, the indigenous people of Asia, Northern Asia, Russia, Siberia, that area, um, it's a similar type thought of what the Denisovans might have looked like. Um, if you actually look at the skull, if you go down to like what we think, the bones looked like. Now they're related to Neanderthals, so we have a little more on the Neanderthal skull to sort of predict what that might have been like. But also don't. These things were heavily muscled, and we don't see that in a lot of reconstructions. But there is just, if you look at bone density, which is how we measure kind of what the musculature would have looked like, because you had to have a much stronger bones to counter the force of muscles, of those muscles. We're talking about thick things, and I'm not sure why all the like drawings and forensic sketches and stuff that you see all the time typically aren't very muscle, but we really need to be thinking more in terms of like, look at some of the photos of like chimps with missing hair and that kind of stuff, and look at that musculature. And that's what we're talking about. Even if you look at ancient human skulls, if you look at a hunter-gatherer skull, it is significantly different from a modern human skull. It's significantly more robust. Yeah, that's indicative of a much stronger creature, which makes sense for everything we're seeing with the Bigfoot phenomenon and giants and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of scientific precedent for everything we're looking at if you dig deep enough. It's just a lot to. I would suggest to anybody that's really interested in this stuff, turn on your news alerts for these kinds of subjects, keywords. You can do that so that when you open your browser, those news stories are popping up, and that's one way I keep up with it. It's, every time I'm opening my Google, these are the news stories I'm getting on the types of things that I'm interested in. And there's it's almost every day there's some sort of new hominid or hominid discovery. We're talking about a time in history that we had a lot of other things that weren't human that looked human living alongside of us. A lot of things on the scale of chimp to Sasquatch or whatever, timber giants and all these other things. So, and before I think we came on the show, we were talking about fossilized giants, or that's
Yes. Petrified.
That's a whole other thing we can't get into tonight. But that's a
yeah. No, Dan in the chat was bringing that up about the petrified giants, and this does it could very potentially look like a petrified giant. Actually,
that's interesting. I mean, did something stick a skull up there? I don't know, but either way, it's a very cool. It almost harkens to like the Olmec heads in a way. I mean, it's still more rough hewn, but I don't know if you've seen the giant stone heads from the Olmecs in South America.
Yeah. I just did a show recently on the Moai to the Easter Island statues, and that was given to me as a remote viewing target. And we did it. Barry, who's in the chat tonight, and I did a show on that. He gave that to me as a blind target, and we talked about the Olmecs that night as well. So
interesting.
We're familiar. Very familiar.
And if you're talking about the Bigfoot subject, if you look at the Mayan howler monkeys and South America, Mexico, the Mayan howler monkey god was called Hanohan, and the Indian monkey god is Hanuman. So it's a very similar name, and if you look at their artistic depictions, it's almost exactly the same. So it's just very interesting how, all these sort of global connections, and like, how is this all connected? How is this all so similar? Where is it all? It's amazing. It's such an intricately woven sort of tapestry we're dealing here with this phenomenon. There's so much to it, and you can never get bored if you just keep digging.
We never get bored over here. I've never been bored in my life, by the way. I can't remember the last time I was bored. My son says he's bored sometimes. I'm like, what is wrong with you? How do you get bored? There's too many things to look into, kid. Too many mysteries to try to solve here. And
keep digging.
It's wild. Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic show tonight, Trey. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I love talking. Yeah.
This was
So,
awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your projects you got coming up and like how
right.
people can
So
support you.
sure. So everybody just needs to tune in to my socials. So Instagram is Squatch Me Now. Uh, TikTok, Squatch Me Now. YouTube, Squatch Me Now. Those are the main ones you want to hit, and just stay tuned because we're doing some fundraising on Kickstarter coming up next month for this project. To hit those sort of things that you don't see anywhere else, things you're never going to see anywhere else. Some really, we've already shot with some amazing technology. You see a little bit of that in the promo I dropped, where we're using some uh, really cool drones and drone goggles. I'm sort of making some adaptations to those, and some camera equipment you've never seen before, thermal drones, thermal equipment. We're introducing you to some equipment that you might not, you can probably actually afford, but may not have seen, which is like, this is a little FLIR right here that you just plug into your camera port on your phone or your charging port on your phone, and you use
Ooh,
your phone as the monitor for your FLIR, and it works really amazing. It's a little piece I tested recently, because I'm trying to find stuff too, like how can we develop kits that people can actually afford to put together
for
that are little
how,
field
how,
kits, and then
how about how much is that? What would that cost me if I bought that?
I think this is wasn't more than $200.
Ooh, I can afford that.
Yeah, so you just
Yeah,
I think they have ones with USB-C and ones with what's the lightning port adapter. But
nice.
yeah, so and it works great. Like I was surprised. So we're testing some high, $10,000 thermal drones, and couple $100 little thermal pieces that you can keep in your utility belt, your field belt or whatever. And 600 millimeter. I've got a whole sequence in the first piece where we talk about why is Bigfoot blurry, where we look at lenses, everything from an iPhone Pro Max to a 600 millimeter, Sony, lens, and everything in between, and all the focal lengths and how that distorts the image, how that improves the image, what it looks like when you have to crop in, zoom in, what pixelization occurs, all these different types of things, because everybody likes to complain about the imagery that, the visual evidence that we get. So we're explaining why that is. So yeah, follow the socials. Keep your eyes out for fundraising opportunities so you can be a part of it. Um, Offering a lot of cool stuff, original art from some of the people we're working with in the crew, that have been on some big shows and do amazing work. Sculpture of Bigfoot, obviously, like all kinds of shout outs, posters, early screenings, behind the scenes, all this kind of stuff that you'll be seeing soon. It's really like a huge undertaking to do something where we're really trying to get to the nitty gritty and touch on every aspect of this subject and sort of everywhere that's been seen in time and through cultures around the world. But it's fun. It's a lot for everybody to take in, but I think you'll like it and you'll sort of learn from it. We're working on field strategies, how to apply if you can get this equipment. If you can't buy this drone, you can rent it. You can rent it, and maybe you can afford to do that for your weekend out of squatching.
Hmm.
And then how to take all this equipment and apply it to actual field strategy. So we have this holler in Western North Carolina. It's private land, and it's kind of like my danger room from the X-Men. We're out there and we're like testing all this sort of ideas and strategies using Big N as sort of like uh, almost like a decoy slash test subject to sort of he's about 7.5 feet tall, so we're in the range, sort of the lower end range, but we're in range. And how does this compare? How does this work with thermal? How can we use thermal? Like thermal to me is not definitive in any way. Like it's a nice shape, and we can see, we're comparing like what would this body look like in a suit versus not in a suit. How does the suit affect the heat signature? And then how can we use the thermal more for recon to then apply other tools to actually get clear imagery captured when we are out in the field and do actually maybe encounter something. Of course, that only counts if it's not going to just hop through a portal and jump into another dimension. But if we're dealing with a physical creature, how can we apply the 600 millimeter lens with this piece of thermal equipment? I've also got the guys from Hellbent Holler, Justin Joe, is one of the featured field teams in the first episode, and they have developed some really cool equipment too. So they have sort of different stuff than I do. They have some more night vision equipment, and they have actually developed some I think proprietary infrasound equipment that they're using. They actually had a company develop that for them. So they go through all that. So there's just there's a lot going on. We're going to show you a lot of different equipment that I don't think you've seen before, show you how to use it in ways you haven't seen it used before.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just really talk to you about how you can, what's how sort of multi-layered the history is here, the science is here, and how difficult the hoaxing of this is. So don't just jump right on it's a guy in a suit every time you see a Bigfoot video, because all we need is one to be real. And I gotta say, for now doing this for 5 years, I've been working on this from sort of concept through pre-production development and filming in pieces here as it go. It's not easy to hoax. It's not easy to hoax. So just saying it's a guy in a suit every time you see a video, especially if you see it on my page, because I've put some work into vetting it most of the time. It's less likely than you think, than most people think. It's easy, cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug, but it's not necessarily always right. And I think that dig deeper, look a little bit more, think more about the subject. If you don't be so dismissive, I'm sure none of the people in this audience are dismissive of the subject, but poke your friends. That's why we're here. If you can open someone's mind on something as trivialized, I think, as Bigfoot has become in sort of pop culture, but if you can take something that's become almost a cartoon to a lot of people and make them realize that there might be something to this, it's going to really open their minds to a million different things that maybe they don't want their mind open to, but in the end, I think it'd be better for them.
Well, bingo. Well, and Bigfoot's around and it's here no matter whether they want it to be or not. And so it's a matter of society's frame of mind shifting, the consciousness, the collective consciousness becoming more aware of it as a whole. And I think it's happening right now. And so it's a great time for you to be. I mean, you are my go-to person when it comes to like hoax videos and things like that. Like I said earlier, I have sent you a couple things. I'm like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and I send videos to other people I know in the industry to see what they think. I'll show them, what do you think about this? How the focus here, this and that different, this artifact in the footage or whatever. Most of the people are, this isn't fake, it's not something, I hear people see CGI, green screen, this, that, and the other. You guys just have no idea. It's so funny because people that haven't worked behind the scenes, especially in the tech end of this kind of stuff and the production end of this kind of stuff and the post-production end, it's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work. You don't realize how much money and time and tech and people and man hours goes into creating anything CGI. But when you're talking about anything in the foreground of a video, any sort of branches or anything like that, as soon as you have something like that, you're talking about multiple layers that you're having to create to make that image work. If something's in the background and there's any kind of foliage or anything in the foreground, that's a tremendous amount of work to create. in CGI, it's probably not going to look real. The best way to do something like that, if you're really trying to create digital effects, would be in like a blue or green screen studio, and then you're having to bring in the foliage to sit in the foreground, and then you're having that. It's again, Occam's razor eventually has to cut back our way. It's just not happening. Nobody's putting that much time and money and effort into producing something they get no credit for, make no money on. I mean, even if it's a viral video on Instagram and it gets, I saw some girl the other day posted, I made $140 on this video that got 2 million views or something like that. And it's like from Instagram, that's what she got paid. Like $140 doesn't cover, 2 hours of producing a lot of these hoax videos. So yeah, I mean, it's intense. I mean, if you just go down through Squatch Me Now and watch all those videos and just realize that we only need one to be real. We only need one piece of evidence, one witness sighting, one footprint, one video, one photo to be real, and the whole phenomenon is legitimized.
Mm-hmm.
I think the evidence is there. I think you can go to Squatch Me Now on Instagram and you have all the evidence you need to realize that there is some sort of viable reality to this phenomenon, and it's time to start digging deeper.
Yeah, there's patterns here. There's patterns, and there's a lot of evidence. A lot of evidence. It's so wonderful to hear this perspective, especially from a researching point of view. And I know the audience really appreciates you being here tonight, just as I do. And so thank you, Trey. Yeah, man, I love chopping it up with you because you bring in a whole new angle to the research from the tech side of it. And so it's probably going to make a lot of people look at these videos differently now from here on out, any kind of evidence and stuff. And it's not, when I think of a hoax, I think of like, I think of a lot of things, right? And I have questioned a lot of videos I've seen, but I've also gone back and looked at those again after I've had conversations with you in the past and thought, man, well, it would be really hard to fake that now. It's almost too fantastistical,
We should question them. We should question them. And that's, I want everybody to question them. That's the whole thing. I would love for anybody that has a question about a video to drop a comment, and I'll come talk to you about it on Instagram or wherever it is. But I think at the end of the day, you really dig, and if you have any sort of real comprehension of what it takes to do this kind of stuff, it's a lot harder and a lot less likely that it's hoaxed than most people might think.
Yeah. Well, dang. Okay. Well, everybody, please go to Squatch Me Now all over social media, on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Kickstarter as well. You have is it a link tree, I guess, too, on your Instagram?
Yeah,
so
I think so. And we put up I think in the old information that you had before, we had squatchmenow.net. That site's actually down right now. I'm putting up a squatchmenow.com. .com wasn't available back in the day when I first started, and suddenly it's back up. So I pulled it all down, and we are sort of going to when we finish the rebrand, we're going to go up with the new squatchmenow.com. So for now, everybody just go to the socials, and all the information on this project as it drops will be coming there. Again, we're starting with the Giants from the West is episode 1, and that's going to be everything kind of we talked about tonight. Sulkaloo, Boojum, and Bazajan, and why is Bigfoot blurry, all these kinds of things. Devil's Head. We're going to tie all that stuff together. We'll talk sort of about where these giants came from, some different paths they might have taken. Are they Bigfoots? Are they giants? We'll get into it all. Are there other, when we get to Georgia, which is the next piece, there's the Uwharrie, which were giants. They were called Irish giants because they were tall, red-haired giants that were deer herders. That were supposedly lived in South Carolina and Georgia. So we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit. It's a whole nother piece of the puzzle that's very obscure. Nobody really knows or talks too much about the Uwharrie, but you guys can Google that. It's Duhare, I believe is how it's spelled. But it kind of harkens to the red-haired giants of the Southwest, and a lot of other references to red-haired giants throughout history. So, and we'll go to the Okefenokee. Is that how you say it?
Okefenokee, the
Okefenokee,
Okefenokee.
and then
South
and
Georgia.
then of course Blue Ridge, the Blue Ridge area, and above that.
That's my stomping grounds. That's where I do my research. I'll be there next weekend.
Yeah. So, and I'm not. We're still filming, and I'm still assembling all of sort of the edits. So I'm not going to stick. I feel like with the way distribution goes today, there's no real rules. We're going to just go with where the content takes us, and it'll be as short or as long as it needs to be each episode. Some may be 45 minutes, some may be an hour and a half. It's just how long it takes to tell the story, and we may spend 2 episodes in Georgia if we need to. But we're just going to run with it and follow the mystery.
Yeah. Stay on the hunt.
Yeah.
On the hunt. That's where we're at tonight. On the hunt with the Cryptid Huntress tonight. You better come hang out with me sometime in Georgia. Come down and we'll take you to some Bigfoot spots.
Yeah, I'll be coming for sure. I gotta go. I gotta meet up with Jesse too, your cousin.
My cousin Jesse Duke. Yeah,
we'll be going.
He's about to have a baby. Actually, well, he's not. His wife is. His wife, not him, y'all.
Yeah, well, we'll be at the. We'll definitely be seeing. He's got a great sculpture at the Blue Ridge Bigfoot Museum, Expedition Bigfoot.
I'm going there next weekend. I'm going to go. I'll have some pictures of me in front of that big old thing. It's like a 10-foot tall Bigfoot. Yeah.
Yeah. I've talked to Dave quite a bit. We're going to be filming at the museum.
Nice.
Some point in the future, I'm trying to schedule those dates. But we'll definitely. Maybe we should do a live from somewhere when we get up, in person live to promote when we're filming.
Yes. Yeah, I'm heading up there next weekend. I'm speaking at a UFO conference in Blue Ridge on Saturday, and we're planning. Some of us at the conference are going to be going over to Expedition Bigfoot. That's the name of the museum. So, yeah, everybody, y'all come up and see me next weekend, okay? And Trey, if you're in the area, come to Blue Ridge. We'll be up there talking about UFOs next Saturday. Right. Yeah.
Is that the museum, your event?
No, actually, we're going to be up in. I forgot where exactly. Fannin County is where Blue Ridge is. Yeah, it's like downtown Blue Ridge, I think. So it's just a little ways from Cherry Log. It's not too far from there. Yeah. Yeah. It's in the area. Lots of Bigfoots and all that jazz. So yeah. Well, Trey, thank you so much for being here. I know somebody in the chat was asking, they said, I don't have apps. They don't have apps. Is there another way to follow you other than, I guess, YouTube? You have a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah. You can go to the YouTube. I don't, I'm trying to get better about YouTube. I need to do better about YouTube. I just, you find your platform that's just the most comfortable, and you stay there a little too much. And
I'm on Instagram a lot.
That's for me, Instagram, but I'm going to work on YouTube. They've added so many features now that it's basically like every other social platform. So there's like your community space for posts, and you can post shorts like reels and all that kind of stuff. So I need to start doing more. I'm definitely planning on doing the bulk of any longer form content behind the scenes, and that kind of stuff will all be on YouTube. So follow me on YouTube, and I will let everybody know when the new site's up, and then you'll just be able to follow the blog there.
Well, shoot, you guys, just type in Squatch Me Now, and all the links will come up.
In your trouble I'm getting into.
Yeah, exactly. And his website will be back up soon, squatchmenow.com, you guys. So go to that too. Yeah. Well, I'm super excited. I hope you'll come back and hang out with us again soon. This has been a fantastic conversation. Yeah. Okay.
I can talk about this forever, so.
Oh my God.
There's always something I forget that I wanted to mention. So have me back.
Well, write it down when you remember anything you forgot. Okay, and we'll talk about it next time. Yeah. Okay.
I just need that in my notebooks. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, everybody, have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for sticking around and hanging out with us for nearly 3 hours tonight.
Yeah.
This has been a wild ride, but it has been fantastic. And I wanted to thank Kent and Maureen for the super stickers tonight. That was very sweet of both of you guys. Thank you so much. And Gus, my little furry friend. Thank you as well, Gus, for that. So you guys, please come back and see me on Monday. I'll be back live with a live show at 1 p.m. Eastern on Monday. And I have a great lineup of guests next week, including Nick Sylvester. He's coming on Wednesday. So you guys, please be safe out there. Keep your head on a swivel. We're living in really crazy times right now, but don't live in fear. Okay, nobody live in fear. And do you have any final words tonight, Trey? Any final thoughts before we?
No, I mean, I think I've done that like 3 times. Draw my final thoughts. I might be out of final thoughts, but at the end of the day, keep just being curious. I think that's the most important thing, is be curious about life. It's such a magical thing, and sometimes we forget that. And I think that's probably one of the most important things about this kind of subject matter, is that it keeps us reminded that life is magical and there's more to it than we know.
I love that. That's 100% right. Yes. So you guys keep your vibrations high, and have a wonderful night, and stay safe out there. Trey, thanks again for being here, and I will see you guys on Monday. And good luck with your documentary, with all your films and stuff. Come back and see us soon. All right, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you later.
I